We are live.
Welcome, sisters and brothers, comrades and friends. Thank you for joining us today at the first cross-country Workers' Action Movement, better known as WAM, conference. Following the success of the WAM campaign at the Ontario Federation of Labour in November 2019, we aim to wage a solid push for new policies and leaders at the Canadian Labour Congress Convention in June 2021. My name is Elizabeth Bice. I'm the Federal Treasurer of Socialist Action, a member of Socialist Caucus, and a past secretary of Toronto York Region Labour Council, and a retired member from the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. We acknowledge that we are hosting this event on Indigenous lands across Turtle Island known as North America. That includes the unceded territories of the Mississauga of New Credit, the Wendat, and Haudenosaunee people. I'm speaking to you today from Jamaica, where the indigenous Taino and Arawak-speaking people began arriving here 4,000 years ago, but were wiped out by European colonial powers. We join in the fight for justice, recognizing that there can be no real reconciliation without restitution. That entails seizing the assets of the big resource corporations and returning them to the commons. Workers across the country are on the front lines fighting COVID-19 with inadequate support from our labor movement. The vaccination delays, the lack of personal protective equipment, paid sick leave, the overall priority of profits over human needs, with the spotlight on the most precarious and vulnerable working, keep the economy moving, have all shown the need for a dramatic change in labor union priorities and leadership. This WAM conference will focus on current trends in the labor movement, including bargaining for essential workers in dire need of decent wages, job security, and PPE on the front lines. We will look at the wildcat strike launched by health sector workers in Alberta and the fight for equity in our labor movement. We will hear from activists who work on the ground, fighting for workers' rights, who call out the misleadership of our unions and the lack of progress in fighting systemic racism, concession bargainings, the far right, and eco-catastrophe. Here is the agenda for today's conference. Starting on this one, of course, at 1 p.m., we will have three speakers, Debbie McGuinness, Greg Mady, and Nicholas Thomas. After this, the panel will be followed by questions from the online audience and discussion, and then we'll take a short break of 5 or 10 minutes when we will proceed at 3 p.m. or earlier if possible with the next segment. And that's preparation for the Canadian Labour Congress Convention in June with Barry Conway, Sandra Griffith-Bonaparte, Stephen Crozier, and Julius Arscott. This also will be followed by questions from the online audience and motions to authorize our next steps. So let's begin with our first panelist. Debbie McGuinness, Liquor Board of Ontario worker. She's president of OPSEU Local 5110, LBED, Provincial Health and Safety Committee. So welcome, Debbie. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be here with comrades who all have the same goal. So I wanted to start off by saying that at LBED, as we commonly call ourselves, Liquor Board Employees Division, we were designated an essential service. But I wanted to say thank you to the essential workers out there. I want to say thank you so much, because during this pandemic, you've given so much. So I wanted to start with that. But myself, as a union activist, I made a commitment to champion health and safety in the workplace. I did this years ago when I noticed how many issues were tied to health and safety. So this subject, with this subject, I made a deliberate and conscious decision to support and empower my co-workers and comrades as I progressed. 3 years ago, I was voted in as chair after spending years working on health and safety in my local and throughout the province. I achieved my goal and was chair. There's 8,000 of us LBED workers, about 800 in my own local and 8,000 of us across the province. So provincial chair I was able to support and empower workers throughout the province. I found that I could be most effective in this role. I spent a few years feeling, that we made strides. We definitely made strides. However, I still did not feel that most workers embraced the union and embraced in solidarity. It was frustrating. There's, of course, a lack of responsibility from the employer and some of our own union leaders. Then about a year ago, COVID-19 hit. And although we have been negatively impacted, I finally saw how workers could take control of their own workplace and their safety. Out of distress and worry, they were driven to take the lead, to question their managers, to question the employer, to empower themselves and to educate themselves on the Ontario Health and Safety Act and their collective agreements. Like no other time before, they were feeling empowered. As chair, I was able to implement changes that promoted safety. I fought so hard for PPE, for mental health breaks, no more having the employer ask us for sick notes during COVID. We fought for safe customer capacity in the retail stores. We fought for safety in the warehouses. At the end of the day, I realized that these procedures that were put in place that I fought so hard for would never have happened without the solidarity from the workers. Never before had I seen such solidarity. Also, I found that the divisional executive worked really hard and supported each other. There wasn't anything divisive going on. We really worked to make sure that we promoted the workers' concerns and that we kept the employer at bay with their divisive tactics. Oh, yeah, there's been highs and lows. How could there not have been with an employer that exploits us? The workers at LCBO have 70% of us have no guarantee of hours. 70% of us have no sick days. But the spirit of solidarity with this newfound confidence from the workers to promote their own safety at work is what excited me the most. And it continues to excite me. I know that we must have courage and we must keep up the fight. This pandemic has shown us how important unions are and how important solidarity is. We must build on this confidence, this newfound confidence, because what I realized is a lack of confidence affects participation, and a lack of participation will negatively affect the labor movement and our progressive values. We must stand together no matter where we fall in society to push for opposition to worker precarity, to lack of sick days, and to austerity and the extreme right voices in Canada, which have been on the rise. For us, especially at the Liquor Board Employees Division, because we are going into bargaining, we must keep up the fight. We know that we have a government that chooses to take away our rights, has chosen to put the worker down. So we must stand strong and fight like never before. I'm pretty confident that we will go in and we will form a good fight in the next few months to achieve success for the worker, to achieve what is rightly ours. So wish me luck on that, because I think we are in the fight for our lives.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. Okay, so our next speaker is Greg Mady. He's president of the Edmonton and District Labour Council, member of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, and he will report on hospital support staff who launched the historic wildcat strike in Alberta. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. I was just putting the finishing touches on my speech here, so we'll see how it goes. But I won't keep you for my full time because I really do think a lot can come out of the questions that we can discuss here. So, as I was introduced, my name is Greg Mady. I am the president of the Edmonton District Labour Council and member of CUPW. I want to be abundantly clear that I do not represent the union or rank and file that I will be talking about in any way. I am merely reporting on what I witnessed from my position and through my activism in the Edmonton labor movement. What happened on October 26th last year is still working its way through the courts, with the government trying desperately to prove that the union aided and organized this action in order to fine them tens of millions of dollars and potentially decertify them. So, needless to say, getting any information from anybody involved will not be happening at this time. But I will do my best to shed some light on what happened and answer as many questions to the best of my ability. I personally believe that the lessons that we can learn from this day are invaluable for the fight ahead of us, and the best way we can learn is from each other. Now, you might be asking, why is a mailman here talking about a wildcat strike put on by hospital support staff? My answer may confuse you, but the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, which is AUPE, represents close to 90,000 workers in Alberta and are not part of the House of Labour. With 58,000 members in healthcare, the members of the union are being specifically singled out by impending cuts by the governing United Conservative Party, which is known as the UCP here. So much so that during the pandemic, they announced the plan to privatize 11,000 healthcare workers to save $600 million. According to them, this must be done to help subsidize the $4.7 billion they gave to profitable businesses who then proceeded to lay off workers and move out of province. But I digress. The importance of this announcement was felt across the labor movement in the province because it was the first concrete step that we all knew the UCP would be carrying out once elected. Their agenda of privatization, austerity, and union busting was known well before they got elected. Luckily, the executive at AUP decided to take the action that was needed to protect their members and our public healthcare system long before they were even elected. Over the course of the year prior to the wildcat, they hired around a dozen internal organizers to educate their members on what will happen, what the union can do, and what they can do, and most importantly, what can be done to stop it. They told them honestly that their jobs and salaries cannot be secured at the bargaining table with this government. It was in their hands, and the union could support them, but they cannot do it without them. Ensuring their lists are up to date and that members and local leadership were able to stay in touch and actively discuss their needs and how to accomplish them was their primary goal. The other part of the story starts about 8 years ago when my union, the CUPW, and my local here in Edmonton was trying to educate our members on the need to empower the rank and file on the work floor to take the actions that they needed to achieve the results that they required. A small group of activists set out to adapt an IWW direct action course to the needs of our local and train activists. We called it Taking Back the Work Floor. Through the years, we had varying success, including a wildcat of our own, but nothing that created meaningful change. After 15 years without a negotiated agreement at CUPW, and various executive groups doing little to encourage this training, the gains were minimal, but the training was there and it was successful. We elected an executive that was 100% committed to rolling out this training as far as possible, and it started to show some dividends fast. Meanwhile, over the time, our local saw many members become staff at AUPE and preach the virtues of this training, and my local was glad to work with AUPE to adapt it so they could roll it out as much as possible to their members during this time of internal organizing. Eventually, another ex-postal worker and course creator was hired as the executive director for organizing and labor relations at AUPE. Not long after the wildcat strike that occurred at over 50 healthcare locations across the province, basically he was elected, and then we saw the wildcat remarkably soon. Hospital support staff walked off the job. citing the protection of our public healthcare system as their motivation, and told the world that they would be out one day longer than our Premier, Jason Kenney. Union members and the public from across the province walked the line with them and supported their struggle, but ultimately, none of the other unions joined them in the wildcat strike. And before the end of the day, the local chairs of AUPE accepted the Labor Board's ruling that the strike was illegal and told their members to go back to work. An order which they uniformly complied. To date, we know that 771 members are grieving a letter of reprimand and 27 of their members are grieving their suspensions. I'm sure historians from all sides will have a different account of that day and time. Some will say it's a victory for the working class. Others will say it's a victory for the government and the agents of capital. But only time will tell. As an organizer and an observer, the only thing I can say for certain is that the workers weren't adequately inoculated against what exactly would happen. They all knew their actions were illegal. They knew that the Labor Board would order them back to work. Yet they did say that they would be out basically indefinitely. Saying that they'd be out for one day longer than our Premier, and in the end, they weren't even out for a whole 24 hours. One thing I know for certain is that if you plan a wildcat strike and want others to join you, you have to be prepared to give them time to actually join you. Other healthcare unions were not as prepared with the internal organizing that AUPE had done, and had taken formal steps to let their members know about their health and safety rights at the workplace. But that message had barely gotten out by the time the workers' lines were broken. In the labor movement, we like to romanticize moments like these. Like, one day things just snap and people stand up for what's right. But in reality, it takes months and years of concerted investment of time and resources to make events like this happen successfully. There are no shortcuts to successful organizing, and AUPE proves that they took the steps to have their internal ducks in a row. The problem is, when you're looking for societal change, even the largest union in the province won't be enough. Thank you, and I look forward to having your questions.
Elizabeth,
Sorry about that. Yes, I know. It's just I had to fix my internet. Something went the matter with the connection just momentarily, but I'm back. Okay, so our next speaker, thank you very much, Greg. Our next panelist is Nicholas Thompson, social justice advocate who is leading the Black class action lawsuit against the federal government for systemic discrimination against Blacks. Nicholas is president of the Public Service Alliance of Canada, Local 48. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you very much for having me here, and welcome everyone. I want to first acknowledge where I'm speaking from in Toronto. I want to acknowledge this land as Turtle Island, unceded land that belonged and belongs to the Indigenous Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people and their descendants long before colonial powers arrived and named it Canada. Comrades, labor is in jeopardy, and we must act now to save labor. COVID-19 has presented significant challenges for us, such as being able to mobilize workers virtually. We need to have responsive and effective leadership to take us forward. COVID-19 has further shone a light on the most vulnerable, and that is racialized populations, precarious workers, and low-wage earners who are the most or who are more at risk of being afflicted with COVID-19. Inequity continues to be its own pandemic within the labor movement. Black, Indigenous, and people of color remains highly underrepresented in labor. Our unions continue to be led predominantly by white males. And that's why I advocated against anti-Black racism and discrimination at the Public Service Alliance of Canada. The union is finally working in a meaningful way to support and represent Black workers. In order for us to address systemic discrimination within our workplaces, Our unions must be representative and strong. Federal workplaces continue to be highly underrepresented at all levels. As a matter of fact, if you go to any of the public service website, you'll see that the leadership is predominantly white. Where are us? Where is the diversity? Is our strength? And that's why we filed the Black Class Action lawsuit against the federal government, a landmark case that seeks to represent 45,000 Black workers beginning in 1970, seeking to not only provide compensation for damages as it pertains to the failure to hire and promote by purposely excluding Black workers from hiring and from promotional opportunities. Inequity, inclusion, and diversity bring with them many intersecting challenges. And allyship it's not an identity. It's a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability with Black workers. So in short, our claim seeks to open up Canada's public service. And what we know about the civil rights movement, what we know is that when we win rights for Black workers, we win rights for all underrepresented groups. We see how the door opens for everyone else. And we're already seeing how the federal government is moving not only to look at issues specifically with Black workers, but it's also looking at all other underrepresented groups, like disabilities or the LGBTQ community. The government is looking at addressing all of those things. And I just want to change gears a little bit just to talk about the importance of allyship, because it is key to addressing the underrepresentation within the labor movement and within the federal government. The first thing I'll say is be willing to listen and learn. In order to be an effective ally, it is necessary to understand the experiences of those that you want to support. So the best way to reach that understanding is to be a good listener. Number two, help open up spaces just like this. It is important to use your own privilege to assist in efforts towards equity, because there will be times when you will, as an ally, you would have to stand back from your leadership positions that you were afforded and critically analyze the boardrooms and committees that you sit on, and ask yourself why it's all white or mostly white, and then do something about it. Number three, do your own research, because regardless of what white folks think, it's not the job of Black folks to teach you about racism and why it's wrong. And saying that you have a Black friend or a Black sister-in-law, or, you know, it's not good enough. Four, resist the white savior complex. Telling a Black person how to deal with oppression may seem like a helpful idea, but it's actually harmful. Offering advice implies that the onus is on us and assumes we have not already made the efforts to overcome racial injustice. And finally, you have the opportunity to start in your own circle. White allies usually have the advantage of being able to communicate with more white folks within their own circles. And you have the chance to help promote equity, equality, and racial justice within your own community. So I challenge you to call out your friends and family and colleagues on their racism and microaggressions, even when it's uncomfortable, and more so when no one is around, when there's no Black folks around to be offended. And I'm just going to end by saying that, you know, I'm very hopeful of what the future presents. And, you know, we've seen allies and predominantly white allies from across the country, from across the world, from coast to coast to coast, standing up against anti-Black discrimination, standing up against all of these systemic issues, right? Telling their parents, no, I'm going to Black Lives Matter protests, right? To those allies, thank you. And we didn't create this problem. We did not create the inequitable society that we live in. We certainly did not create these structures that allow one group to be elite over others. So it's very important for allies to play an active role in addressing the systemic issues. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have these opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you to all our panelists. Now we will go to our producer, Kurt, who will go to the audience and put their questions in the chat column. We were doing, as I said earlier, 3 at a time. And the lineup will be Greg, Nicholas, and Debbie. And you each have up to 5 minutes. So Kurt, the questions, please.
One moment. There we go. So the first question comes from Juliet A. He asks, question to Debbie. Can you describe the current climate in LCBO bargaining, the background in the fight for PPE during the pandemic, and what you hope to win in this round of bargaining? Daniel Terade asks, to what extent was there labor solidarity during the wildcat strike? What about the provincial NDP? And then Spencer Roki asks, are there potential strategies we can implement in our unions to promote the idea of socialism and using our labor as leverage for political change towards appropriating the means of production?
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Okay, so we're going to our panelists now, Greg, Nicholas, and Debbie, and you have up to 5 minutes each. Right?
Okay. Well, I'll do the one that directly is asking about my situation first, and we'll see where we go from there. Labor solidarity during the wildcat strike. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, everybody showed up in solidarity. Everybody brought coffee in solidarity. Everybody brought donuts in solidarity. But did anybody walk off the job in solidarity? No. That's really ultimately where I think a lot of the change needs to happen. And obviously for any kind of prolonged fight with the government is going to need to happen. There was a lot happening. Obviously it's a pandemic. These are hospital support staff. People were in need, but there was a lot of people driving by on the street hawking their support, and a lot of people from the public are joining the lines across the province, because like I said, there were 52 locations across the province. On top of that, what about the provincial NDP? Well, I mean, that's a good question. Some of the MLAs did show up to some of the picket lines, and I think actually a lot of them did ultimately. But the question I think more appropriately that needs to be asked about this is that where were the NDP in the lead up to this kind of thing? The previous government was our provincial NDP. They negotiated zeros for every single public sector contract that they had. And then they had wage reopeners in them for after the next election, effectively trying to hold members hostage for their votes in order to maybe get a wage reopener in their 4th year. They lost the election. The UCP came in, and obviously those wage reopeners were well settled before they actually got anywhere. I think as a party of labor, they definitely need to do a lot more in this province. I think we need to do a lot more to hold them to account, to be quite honest. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done there as well. I will just say, for those of you from across the country, I've lived in every province across the country, and Alberta is very unique in that we have 2 parties. We used to have just one party, which was the Conservative Party. We had red Tories and blue Tories, and the Wild Rose, which were even further right from them. Ultimately, we were left with anybody else can be in one of these other opposition parties, which had 3 or 5 seats. When the NDP got elected, they tried to be the catch-all for everybody, and that obviously watered down their politics pretty substantially. You know what? I think I might have used up most of my time just answering that one question.
No, you didn't.
No? Okay. Well, then, you know what? I'm going to touch on one of the other ones that I saw here. Obviously, LCBO bargaining is not in my wheelhouse. But as far as getting our unions to promote the idea of socialism, and getting involved in democratic means of production, all sorts of things, I do think that's where we ultimately need to be spending a lot of our time, because we don't advocate for the public good. We don't do any kind of like public good bargaining anymore. And I think if we were to put ourselves out there and to really work with workers who aren't unionized to get them some kind of democratic control over their lives, I think we would really be a lot farther ahead when it comes down to actually organizing for any kind of meaningful social change on a broader scale. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Our next panelist is Nicholas. Do you still do not want to speak to these questions, or have you changed your mind? Nicholas.
Well, I did see a question from Julius in the chat that pertains to PSCC. So if you would permit me to answer that,
Of course.
that's well within my scope.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
I'll read out Julius's question, and he said, "Can you go into details surrounding the leadership of the Public Service Alliance of Canada attempting to prevent equity conference with Speaker Nora Loretto?" So in short, the union was attempting to address equity issues, so it and specifically anti-Black racism within the Public Service Alliance of Canada. And one of the first things that they did was they created a webinar, and the webinar was titled "A Webinar for White Folks on Anti-Racism." And white folks was not happy that a webinar was targeting them with regards to anti-Black racism. And there was a lot of noise about this and complaints about this, that the name of the webinar should change. And shortly after, one of the speakers, who's a journalist in nature and a writer, Nora Loretto, she was trolled on social media, Rebel Media. I know many of you know Rebel Media, and Rebel Media is publishing these stories about how she should not allow to speak and whatnot. And shortly after that, people began trolling her on Twitter and harassing her, and she told one of them off. And they used that as an opportunity to say, as a basis for her not to speak, and they canceled her contract. And then the entire webinar was in a limbo. And when I heard about that on a Saturday morning, by Saturday evening, we were having a virtual town hall mobilizing workers to reverse that decision. Now, the union does not usually reverse decisions and whatnot, Julius. It's, we're dealing with a lot of outdated mechanisms that has been in place for decades, right? A lot of structure that, if you ask me personally, it's not in keeping with the times and whatnot, right? So the union was struggling to deal with the issue, and the other facilitator, Paige Gillette, said that she was not going to participate in solidarity. She was, if you cancel my co-facilitator, then I'm not participating. So the entire conference was in limbo, and we started mobilizing, and we had over 2,000 people tune in to this, and that included staff and workers from across the country that was saying that this webinar had to go on. And we issued a call to action, and the union started receiving notices, the staff started mobilizing internally, and we had all of these actions happening. And a few days later, the national president accepted responsibility for everything. He apologized. He rescinded the earlier decision, and the webinar went on, and it had a record attendance. And it just goes to show, Julius, that when workers stand up and in solidarity, even within our own unions, that we do have the power to effect that change outside of a convention or a triennial, or we do have the power to mobilize and to bring about the change that we seek within the workplace. And that was one of the first instances of workers mobilizing and getting the union to change its gear. So if you are in a union that is, taking steps, that is not in the best interest of all workers or is acting outdated, or, as workers, don't just sit back and say, well, and complain and gossip and the union doesn't do anything and where does my dues go, and do something about it. You have the power to act. The union is you. So you have the power to bring workers together and to act. So thank you for that question, Julius.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Okay, Debbie, unmute yourself.
I'm looking at the question. So I'm first of all, I'm going to address the PPE issue. So when we've always had negativity around PPE, it's never been enough. We've always fought a battle with it. But when COVID-19 started, obviously we did need our PPE more than ever. I will say that the arguments that had already been put at the table to corporate LCBO, it was great that we had put some strong language in there to provide the PPE. So we were very lucky to have already fought the battle on it and then proceeded to make sure that our workers were protected with PPE. There was a lot of games played. I mean, you can imagine that a corporation as big as my employer is going to put out a lot that comes across as lip service. So at the end of the day, if we're not willing to push for our own needs, for our own rights in the actual workplace, when the language has been put there, then we're going to lose out. But as I said already earlier, what did happen, which was quite remarkable, was how the workers empowered themselves to make sure that when they pushed for those rights that we had already let them know were there. So rather than backing down when managers and supervisors were playing games with them, they used the language that was there. They used what they knew that their union had fought for and continued to push. They knew the rights, they empowered themselves, we made sure they were educated on the Occupational Health and Safety Act and where PPE came in there, and they made sure that they got what they needed. And it was really very exciting to see that happen and everyone working together. We do at the LCBO, obviously we have hundreds of locations. We don't have that luxury of being together in one building. And so that already is a challenge. But because of social media and because of COVID-19 driving more and more people to hear from each other on social media, it really upped the game for us and allowed us to connect, no matter if you're in Sudbury or Toronto or Windsor or Cornwall. We were together on this fight. We were together knowing our rights under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and we were able to push forward for it. I will let you know that although we know here in Ontario that the Ministry of Labour was not very supportive to the worker at the beginning. We're not even sure what the hell went on there. I'm sure most people read the media reports of Ministry of Labour, at least at the beginning of COVID, not actually going into the workplace to investigate. I do think that improved. And by the way, by no means am I blaming those members, because they're often bargaining unit members themselves. I'm blaming the government there. Absolutely blaming the government for their lack of responsibility. However, we knew that once Ministry of Labour did start to actively go into our workplaces, we found by then that there was none, even though we saw many other retail locations get orders. We were good. In fact, there's no end to the amount of praise I want to give the workers at the LCBO for being responsible for their own safety and making sure that their employer gave them what they needed. To quickly point out around the question on bargaining, we're at the early stages. Our bargaining team has asked us not to go forward and let out too much, but I will say that when we had our demand set, I was so proud that our members thought about what they wanted and what they voted in. And where in other years we've always seen the first item be wage increase, which of course is always important, but we know that our bargaining team is going to go there. They voted in some very, very special items for the bargaining to push forward on. Example, job security, which is huge for us at the LCBO, since we have a right-wing government that would sell us off in an instance, even though we make 1.3 billion for the people of Ontario for them to use for hospitals and schools and other
30 seconds.
Okay, well, I think that hopefully I've answered the questions. I'm very proud of our membership, and I do think that we are ready for the fight as we do go into bargaining.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Before we go on to the next round of questions from our audience, I'm going to ask Barry Weisleiter to speak for 3 minutes on the locked out workers from Molson's. Unmute yourself, Barry.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, comrades and friends across the country, my name is Barry Weisleiter. I'm a retired secondary school teacher. I was for years in OSSTF and before that in Ontario Public Service Employees Union, and including elected 3 times to its executive board. Despite the lack of imagination and resolve by the union and NDP tops, there is a remarkable fact when it goes to the issue of trends in the labor movement, a remarkable fact that union representation in Canada actually increased from 30 to 31.3% during the economic plunge that affected most economic sectors in the pandemic. And while business unionism can't flatten the curve or adequately cope with artificial intelligence and robotization, we do know that capitalist production will rely on human, physical, and mental labor for decades to come. The power of the working class, when unchained, will assert itself and change the world fundamentally. Though union pickets are today relatively few, it would be a mistake to judge the existing relationship of class forces simply on the basis of the quiescence of the labor bureaucracy. One inspiring example is that of the 300 employees of Molson Coors in Toronto who voted 71% to reject concessions. These 300 workers rejected a bad deal about a little over a week ago. They are members of the Canadian Union of Brewery and General Workers, Local 325, and that is a component of NUPCI, to which OPSU and other provincial unions across the country belong. What did they face? They faced a rich multinational corporation, Molson Coors, with a huge brewery and distribution network emanating from their central operations in North Etobicoke. They experienced the introduction of 2-tier wages and benefits back in 2010, but it was then accepted with the understanding that it would be phased out. In the latest round, the employer demanded that it be entrenched, made a permanent feature of the collective agreement, and that means that new hires would be capped at 84% of the previous wage scale. They wouldn't start there, but that would be as far as they could climb. In addition, the company intends to transfer all but most senior employees from the defined benefit pension to a newer defined contribution, which means your pension is basically invested in the stock market, and good luck. They are also faced with an absolutely inhuman work schedule, a number of shifts that would increase the hours per day with no overtime pay, and maybe add workers on shift in a similar situation, reducing the costs of the company in terms of benefits. So the workers said no. They said no by 71%, and my hat's off to them. And and I and some comrades from Socialist Action and Workers' Action Movement went to their picket line on Thursday. They have 5 lines at the entrances to the huge Molson Coors plant in North Etobicoke. We expressed our solidarity. They're really busy trying to keep the lines up around the clock, 24/7. That's why they can't be here with us today. But they demonstrate something very, very clear, that there's an appetite for change. There's an appetite for fighting the austerity agenda. There's an appetite for fighting the boss's attempt to increase the rate of exploitation if only leadership is demonstrated. And these workers are demonstrating leadership. They're providing us with inspiration. They're showing that when we fight, when we stand up, we can win. They will win. And I encourage everyone who's in a position, who's within range of the plant there, 33 Carlingview in North Etobicoke, to go to the picket lines.
30 seconds, Barry.
Demonstrate our solidarity and to show that this is a trend that we want to increase. Fan the flames of discontent and fight to win. Thanks very much, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Barry, for bringing that forward. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our producer, Kurt, for 3 more questions. And the lineup will be Nicholas, Debbie, and Greg. And you each have 5 minutes. Kurt?
Okay, so our first question comes from Wendy Goldsmith. She asked, the pandemic has depleted us all, and women in particular have borne the brunt. How do we, sorry, the way she says this is kind of awkward. We're organized, how do we organize and fill our cups while maintaining our place in the struggle? Alex Bedilla asked, what is the main obstacle for unions to gain the labor rights people deserve, and what is the most effective way to fight against this? And Julius A. asked, Nicholas, can you speak to representation and leadership of the labor movement? At least in OPSU, the leadership has not reflected the diversity of the membership, and almost all efforts to change the Constitution have unfortunately failed.
Okay, so you've heard the 3 questions. Nicholas, Debbie, Greg, 5 minutes, Nicholas.
Union leadership is based on democracy, right? So, Julius, in terms of representation in the union, it's almost all positions are voted on, either by a delegate system or either by the entire membership. In order for us to address the underrepresentation issues, we need to have strong leadership who will advocate for that, because ultimately it is delegates who will vote, or the membership at large. So we need to have a leadership that will advocate on the issue and that will lead by example. People have been conditioned, people have internalized racism and discrimination and their own biases. So it's important to have that education. I also think a strong tool is to having mentorship programs. The union should have mentorship programs for BIPOC folks, so that and prepare them to run for positions, because the playing field is uneven. If they're already underrepresented, they're not seeing themselves in leadership, they're already facing many barriers within the workplace. So to now get involved within the union, that, those are further obstacles, and the union certainly does not appear to be welcoming and representative of those folks. So the mentorship is critical, but like I was saying earlier on, opening up those spaces, right? We have the same people running over and over and just taking up those spaces for decades. Opening up those spaces, using that privilege to open up those spaces, right? And really encourage BIPOC candidates to run in the election and support them. Now, a lot of unions have appointed positions. Make those positions equity positions, right? Make those positions equity positions where it is appointment based. So those are some of the things that we can do. And when you talk about OPSU, it's, that is, I mostly deal with federal unions, and that's a provincial union. But OPSU is not isolated from the larger issue that we're facing within labor, and that is that underrepresentation issues. And it'll really come down to the allies, Elizabeth, to to push and make those changes within labor that will make it more representative. And when we make it more representative, we'll make labor more strong.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicholas. Debbie? Unmute yourself, Debbie.
I hope I got the questions right. The first one was women and our place in the struggle. And the question is bang on. Women have felt the brunt of this. I don't think I need to explain how and why. But we do know that going forward, we need to fight for more issues that that represent women in the workplace. We need to be fighting for better daycare. We need to be fighting for paid sick days. We need to be fighting for inclusive workplaces. We can't let go of these subjects. As an activist who has fought for women's struggles for years and years, and as a single mother, I know how important it is, and I know the stress that is put on us. We need to be looking at that, what we're doing about the mental stress that workers deal with every single day, and how we can eliminate that so that we can have healthy days at work. I think for us, the most effective way for us to continue with the struggle is something that I said earlier in my speech, and when I talked about that building on confidence. So I truly believe that if we build the confidence of the workers, if we build and empower our comrades, then that is how we can go forward in this fight with the 1%, with the fight we have with our employer. Because I realize that the lack of confidence affects participation, and a lack of participation then will negatively affect the labor movement. Therefore, if we build on confidence, if we build on educating our members, then we will be able to have a better fight. And I think the last question was about our leadership. And I strongly believe in diversity, and we need to make sure that we're stepping back at times. I know that that's one main reason I did not run in the election for the bargaining team. I want to continue with my fight for health and safety and wellness in the workplace, and wanted to see others move forward, so we don't see the same people each and every time representing us. So we give others a chance, and we promote diversity. And I would absolutely expect the leadership of OPSU to do the same. And we do need to be improving the equity positions. I strongly believe, and it does come up at our convention, and I hope that more and more people realize that those equity positions are very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Greg?
Well, I don't want to sound like too much of a broken record here, but in response to Wendy's question about the pandemic and women bearing the brunt, I mean, I gotta say, I think it's time for all of us to step up and demand a universal childcare program. I mean, I'm not just saying that as a father of two, could take advantage of such a system, but fundamentally, it's the biggest issue that we're facing. I mean, you can't regardless of who you are, you can't meaningfully participate in workplace politics if you've got to go pick up your kids, or you got to worry about where they're going to go the next day, and all sorts of this other stuff. Like you need that to be taken care of, and you need that to know that your kids are experiencing quality, and I don't even say childcare, early childhood education, so that your kids are in the right hands and will be given the best opportunity that they can. So I know the call has gone out. I know this is something that the labor movement has been fighting for long before I was born. But I really do think that if we actually do want to see some change, and we do want to see women participating in the full extent of which they're able in the workforce, it's going to have to be because we have achieved that. And with that in mind, we can move beyond this, sexist position of women being the primary child caregivers, because that's quite frankly very outdated. Next question about the main obstacles for unions to gain the labor rights that people deserve. I will say the main obstacle for unions is unions. The way we are structured, the way that they exist, they perpetuate their irrelevance in a lot of ways. I mean, I touched on it in my speech, but we need to engage with our members. We actually need to talk to them. We need to find out what they want, and we need to give them the tools to get those things. I did mention the course that we designed for our union that was based off an IWW course, direct action grievances, taking back the work floor, all of these things. These are things that we need to actually empower our members to do, instead of holding the keys to power and say, oh, well, we'll talk to the employer. Oh, well, we'll deal with this in the grievance procedure. All of these things deal to our irrelevance, and therefore people aren't going to see the need for it. And then we won't be effective in creating any change when it comes down to either politics or change within our unions, or even just social change. So I think this is definitely the first step that needs to be taken. I think leaders need to be bold, and leaders need to allow for others to step up and potentially make change within their unions. But our structure is so fundamentally flawed in entrenching power instead of spreading it. So that's my answer. The biggest threat to working people is unions. So we need to change that. And so I think we should. And the other question is well out of my wheelhouse. So I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. Okay, so we're going to go back to our producer now, and to let the panelists know we have 2 rounds left of 3 questions each. So we're going to go back to our producer for 3 more. And the lineup of speakers will be Debbie, Nicholas, and Greg, and you have up to 5 minutes. Kurt.
Okay, JPL asks, so this is question is a little, the way he's worded it, I don't know what he means at the start, but let me go over it. JPL asks, legal strike is so dissolved in laws and rules. Can labor movement expect more education and action in the near future despite the COVID situation? Chris Wanamaker asks, if all the unions called a wildcat strike at the same time, what would happen? And Daniel Terade asks, how has the resurgence of the Black Lives Matters protest affected the labor movement?
Okay, so you've heard the 3 questions. Debbie, 5 minutes.
So the first question, I think, was on education and action. And I truly believe, and I think I've said it, and I will say it again, education is part of building confidence. So I think education is one of the ways that we can move forward. It's definitely good action from the labor movement. And that, as I explained earlier in my speech, is how we move forward at the LCBO, at the Liquor Board Employees Division, educating our members on the Occupational Health and Safety Act once we realized we were in a pandemic. And we certainly saw the benefits of educating the membership and empowering the membership. Absolutely. And I think it's a very good thing for us as we go forward into bargaining. We hope to build on that momentum and keep that spark, that interest in people's education. So I love the second question. I don't know if I can answer it, but wouldn't it be great if all of us went out on a wildcat strike? And that's the beauty is in the words there. If all of us, we know at LBED, it would be not only illegal, but also impossible, almost impossible for all of us in every single work site to go on a wildcat strike. One of the challenges we have at the LCBO, other than, well, we've many challenges, and obviously since we're all in different locations, but the LCBO tends to give information out to new employees that they have the opportunity to become managers, and it's very divisive. And of course, it takes years before the workers realize that they're being screwed, and they're more than likely never becoming managers and supervisors. And then they start to realize the importance of their union, and it's far better. But we see a lot of people who aren't educated in the labor movement come in as new workers and believe that they are going to be the next manager. And I guess it's a good ploy on management's end for building that. So again, not only do we have the challenges in the workplaces, but we have the challenges of people insisting that they're going to be a manager by next month, and of course ignoring any of the bulletins that the union pulled out. But we're getting better at this. We definitely are. Social media has definitely helped. I would love to see that. I do know that in Solidarity, there will be a strong movement for strike if the workers are continuously pushed back. But as far as wildcat strike goes, I think we have to educate people more before we can enter into the possibility of all of us going out together. But it is a dream. It certainly is a good dream. And as far as the last question, I'm not sure I am qualified to speak on the Black Lives Matter movement. I fully support it. And as somebody born into privilege, I am listening every single chance I get to what I can do to absolutely improve. It is definitely my job to be here and to be listening to whatever it is I can do to this horrible situation that our society is in.
Thank you, Debbie. Nicholas? Nicholas, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I'll speak to the issue of how has the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter protests affected the labor movement. And I'll just go back. I think context is important here in terms of understanding this, Elizabeth. The labor movement has, was championed by Black activists going decades back. And that's despite unions excluding Black workers. Activists like Cal Bess, the first president of the Public Service Alliance of Canada, or Stanley Grizzle right here in Ontario, who founded the Railway Porters Trade Union Council. Right? The resurgence of Black Lives Matter has really set a fire under the labor movement to address these equity issues. George Floyd, I Can't Breathe, became so iconic and symbolic within the labor movement because, Black workers, Black members cannot breathe within the labor movement. I'll repeat that. Black workers cannot breathe within the labor movement. But there is hope because there is a glimmer of hope that I'm beginning to see labor in terms of addressing these issues. It's very slow, and that's probably more painful because Black workers are showing up injured every day for work from these systemic issues, while the union grapples to deal with the issues. So although labor is slowly responding, it's responding, but again, very slowly. And the difference between now and 2 years ago is really allyship. It is the allies who are protesting from coast to coast, demanding the change. That's why we have politicians coming out and acknowledging this now, because allies are saying the allies are also voters, and they're saying that this is wrong these systems needs to come down, and they're demanding change. And that's why we are here now. Not because we're raising our voices, but it is because of the collective voices of the allies. So we must continue to fight for labor to act. We know that labor has won rights for everyone, from sick leave to maternity leave, parental leave. The employers did not just give these rights to workers, labor won it. And labor can also win rights for equity-seeking groups and to truly make our workplaces representative. But we must start within our own ranks. We must make those changes within labor. We must remove the speck in our eyes before, we must remove the log in our own eyes before we tell the respective employers to remove, what's in theirs. So labor does have that powerful voice. It's a powerful vehicle to bring about the change that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Greg?
Well, I really like what Nicholas just said there about fighting for these things. I mean, bargaining for the public good is something that I think all unions should be doing, and all unions have gotten away from. There's a lot of work that can be won through the bargaining table, but it can only be won if we actually have the power and we are willing to use it. Which leads us, I think, into all of the other questions. I mean, I will say, as a member of CUPW, we haven't had a meaningfully negotiated collective agreement in over 15 years now. The talk on the work floor is that, well, why don't we just accept their first offer because that's the best we're going to get? And then it goes down from there. It's just like, well, why are we going through all this same rigmarole where we go on strike or we get locked out and then they legislate us back to work and then we get a worse offer? Just let's just take it and get on with our day. Like, they know this. I know this is a specific case within the labor movement, but they know how to play us, and they're playing us like a fiddle. And the question is whether or not we actually stand up and say we deserve better and want more. The laws around strikes are completely ridiculous. I mean, we see that right now in the example that I was talking about, where there was a wildcat strike, and they're trying to blame it, or trying to force it, or I guess blame it on the union so they can decertify the union. And of course, see, this is the kid that I was talking about. He needs to go to the bathroom and nobody else can take him. So what I will do is just say that ultimately we do have the power to make these changes, but we haven't exercised it. And like a muscle, it's going to atrophy. And we've got a lot of work to do as a labor movement in order to get to the point. So I have to go, but thank you very much. And I will be back shortly.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. All righty. So thank you. We're going to move on now to the last round of questioning. And there will be 3 more questions, and you each have up to 5 minutes. And the first speaker will be Nicholas, then Greg, and Debbie. That might have to change if Greg is not back. But as it is Nicholas, Greg, and Debbie. Kurt?
Okay. So our first question comes from Barry. He asks, the rate of unionization has actually increased slightly during the pandemic. How can we build on this trend? What action do we need from the CLC to empower workers? Gary Porter asks, will LCBO workers be demanding that the 70% be given full-time jobs and benefits? Isn't that required by solidarity? And Julius asks, question to Greg. It seems that the right to strike exists until workers use it. Do you think that the wildcat strike by hospital support staff will set a precedent for future wildcat actions by workers across the country?
Okay, folks, you've seen the 3 questions. So our lineup is Nicholas, Greg, and Debbie, 5 minutes each. Nicholas?
Thank you. So I'll take the CLC question. And CLC is really, CLC is the House of Labor, right? Representing over 3 million workers across Canada. And I'm going to speak about the CLC from an equity perspective. And I'll say this, and this is the first time that I'm saying this. CLC has failed Black workers. I repeat, CLC, the Canadian Labour Congress, has failed Black workers. Its present president has refused to support Black workers seeking justice in the public service. You know, and I'm going to make a comparison. The CLC issued a statement recently supporting workers as far as India with the farmers' situation, and that is commendable. But we have Black workers right here in Canada that the CLC refuses to support for whatever political reasons. Black workers are suffering here every day, and the CLC refuses to support Black workers while it endorsed Bill Morneau with the OECD. Shameful.
Yes.
So, you know, what the CLC needs to go back to basic and really go back to supporting and empowering affiliates and local area councils to do the work. We need to shift the power from the CLC back down to the workers, to the organizers, to the grassroots organizers. That's where we need to decentralize the power from that executive body there and pass it down, and those fundings back down to labor councils and the local organizers. We need to get the mobilizations on, not expensive campaigns that's not reaching the everyday worker. And mobilizers are struggling to get the resources in place locally. That's what we need at the CLC.
Thank you, Nicholas. And I say Nicholas for CLC president. Okay, so our next speaker is Greg.
Okay, we'll see if I can get through this one without my children. I guess I'll hit mine first, and then we'll see where we go after that. But I mean, it's absolutely true that the right to strike is really ultimately only exists on paper these days. I mean, I can see how fast our right to strike got legislated away when it came a little bit too close to Christmas time for the powers that be. So it really, the repercussions for the corporation, none. Repercussions for government, none. It all falls on the working people, and I think fundamentally that's what is the answer to most of our questions. The wildcat strike here by hospital support staff was great. It did show people again that you can do this. You know, I mean, as much as the UCP here wants to lay off public sector workers en masse, they can't do it all at once, because if they did it all at once, the system would completely collapse. While there was some discipline that got handed out, it is minimal at this point. I guess, like I said in my introduction, we will see. But as far as it's spreading across the country, I don't know if it's going to be that, but it is going to be a collection of actions that do happen. I know here in Alberta, we are facing the first iteration of right to work legislation that this country has seen in quite some time. And it's threatening, obviously, every unionized worker. And the effectiveness of the labor movement. But it only affects the effectiveness of the labor movement in its ability to pay to help things. And fundamentally, from my approach, it's not giving to charity is not the answer. Creating other groups like NGOs to help bring up other messaging issues that are important is not the answer. The answer is to put that money into our membership, educate them on what they can do and the strengths that they have so that they can get out there and they can change the social discourse. And we can still do that even with this right to work legislation that comes into play. And so if we really do focus and we shift to empowering our members, we can see these changes. And then, yes, when those changes start to happen, I do firmly believe that it could roll out across the country. The actions that we need from the CLC to empower workers, I think, is very much in line with that. We need them to step back. We need them to give the tools to the affiliates, and we need the affiliates to actually listen. And I think that's our biggest problem in the labor movement. It's all been everybody stand back and say, "Oh, you take care of your own, and we won't question you on how you do that or why you do that. You just do it because we want your money." Which is important. We do need resources to do any of the good work that we're doing. But ultimately, if we don't criticize, if we don't learn from each other, and if we don't grow as a movement, we won't get anywhere. And I think we've been stagnant for a bit too long as a result of that. People don't try to help. People keep their cards close to the chest. They don't want to have anybody else know where they're at. And so ultimately, there needs to be some buy-in from affiliates beyond the per capitas that they pay to the CLC. There needs to be some social contract buy-in with being part of the labor movement in order to achieve any kind of change for working people across this country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Debbie?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll speak on the first question. And I do want to say thank you to Nicholas for those brave words. We do need to call out our leadership. We do need new leadership. We need brave new leadership. Thank you, Nicholas. My heart sank when I saw what happened with the endorsement of Bill Morneau. I could not believe that. I could not believe that from a union leader. Just as I cannot believe that in my own union in OPSU, when I see Smokey Thomas have something written in, say, The Sun, a right-wing newspaper, where he endorses actions that Ford has taken. I mean, Ford has done nothing than push us down. He is stamping all over us with bills that he's passing, and on at the very, very most, he is mediocre. And for our own union leader to be able to say good things about him and praise him just turns my stomach. So again, in all of us need to be looking at our union leadership and seeing where we can make changes. We do need change. Absolutely do. And maybe it's not enough to show up at union conventions and to vote wisely. We also need to be getting out there and actively endorsing more diverse leadership, in strong, brave leadership, and doing more. We need to be hitting the ground, walking and talking at the same time. So hopefully we can do better next time with the leadership that we have and that we should have going forward. I'll talk too about, the 70%, over 70% of casual workers we have at the LCBO. We do always fight for more full-time jobs. We do want decent work for everyone. If I am now a full-time employee at the LCBO, but I fight hard for those who are not. Now, I will say that not everybody wants full-time employment. We do have jobs to offer for students, and we do have jobs to offer for people who are also working, in the confinements of their schedules with their families. So there's always room for part-time jobs. But what we do know is that the employer has taken advantage of the need for those and swung so far in the last couple of decades towards more precarious work. And that also leads to having workers with no benefits, no paid sick time, and no pensions. And we need to change that. And LBED will always be fighting for more full-time jobs. But I want to let you know one thing that we did gain, a win for us on around the same time as our last round of bargaining 4 years ago. We entered into a wage grid that was equal for everyone. So no matter of being full-time or part-time or casual, we are all on the same grid. The retail workers are on the same grid. It bills by seniority. It cannot be affected if you have a bad manager who dislikes you. We know that is one way they try to get at you. It doesn't matter if you're not in a clique or a favorite. It doesn't matter if you're full-time, part-time, casual. We are all on the same grid, and that was a very big win for us. So although we have not reached the amount of full-time jobs we want, at least all of us are earning the same no matter what. If you're a full-timer with 10 years experience or a part-timer with 10 years experience, your hourly wage is the same. So, and I do believe that that wage grid is the way that we should go. We should never want to see the divisiveness that could come about from giving one set of workers extra bonuses or extra pay. So I truly believe, although I will say that not everyone was on board at it first, but we pushed, we educated, and I can truly say the membership is happy with that win for the wage grid now. The last item was the wildcat strike. I'm not quite sure what else we need to say other than how amazing it would be for all of us to be able to stand up to the employer and support each other, no matter whether you're full-time, part-time, or an LCBO worker or a healthcare worker. How great it would have been if all of us could have stepped outside the workplace and went on strike in an afternoon, say in support of the healthcare workers or the long-term care workers, which we know this pandemic has exposed how badly they have it in the workplace. So I would love it if we could do more, and if we could change the laws. And again, that we need to think about who we are voting in as our premiers in wherever you're living in Canada. I strongly believe that we got to get behind the candidate that we know is going to support the labor movement and is going to rehaul those antiquated laws that I sometimes I fall over knowing what's actually there. I
30 seconds.
I never I couldn't believe when I did find out many years ago that a wildcat strike was illegal. And I do hope that those workers that did get involved in a wildcat strike, their grievances are heard and their arbitrator will support them, and all of us workers support them, and they will be whatever reprimands they had will be dismissed.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. I can't help but weigh in on the Bill and Renault story, because I was enraged. As a retired postal worker, I was absolutely enraged when I found out that the head of the CLC was actually supporting Bill Renault. I mean, here we were, as postal workers in the city of Toronto, retired or active workers, in front of his offices protesting of what the sellout of our workers, our sisters and brothers in our union, while our dues are going to the CLC, paying the salaries, amongst other things, of this man that's actually supporting Bill Renault. I mean, I was enraged, and I'm sure all other postal workers were as well. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents to that. So I want to thank all of our panelists very, very much. What you had to say was wonderful. You were very brave and inspiring words, Nicholas. And, and this leads us now, into the next part of our conference that's going to be starting at 3 o'clock or maybe 10 to 3. And that's all about, preparing for the next CLC convention and the leadership, because the leadership there now is not doing the job. And some of the ones that I've seen on a slate that's being put forward is not going to do the job either, sisters and brothers. They're not. We need to come up with somebody that's going to go there and do the job. So I would ask you, if you can, please stay tuned to the next part of the conference. And once again, thank you all for being there with us today. And I will turn it now over to our producer, Kurt, and I will see you back at 10 to 3. Thanks again. Kurt, are we there?
Yep, I'm here. I'll be playing some music during the interim, just so you know, everybody who's on here, if you are going to speak, you will be heard. We're continuing to broadcast. I'm just going to share a video. Just hold on one moment.
So everybody be back online. If there's any of our speakers, especially watching, be back on at 2:45, please.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up, don't give up the fight. Preacher man, don't tell me heaven is under the earth. Get up, stand up. I know you don't know what life is really worth. It's not all that glitter is gold. Half the story had never been told. So now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Most people think great God will come from the sky, take away everything and make everybody feel high. But if you know what life is worth, you would look for yours on earth. And now when you see the light, you stand up for your rights. Yeah. Get up, stand up. Yeah, yeah. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Life is your right. Get up, stand up. So we can't give up the fight. Stand up for your right. Lord, Lord. Get up, stand up. Keep us traveling on. Don't give up the fight. Yeah.
We're sick and tired of your ism, schism, game, dine and go to heaven in Jesus' name, Lord. We know and we understand. Almighty God is a living man. You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. So now we see the light. We gonna stand up for our rights.
yeah.
So you better
Get up, stand up.
in the morning. Give it up.
Stand up for your right.
Stand up right now.
Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Don't give it up. Don't give it up.
Get up, stand up.
Get up. Stand up.
Stand up for your right.
Get up. Stand up.
Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Get up. Stand up.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up.
Oh, but then he finished speaking, so I have to hang up and rush back, because I'm the moderator, right? So any.
Can we have some more music, please?
Okay, so I'm on attempting to play some more music, so just give me a moment.
Thank you.
Every man got the right to decide his own destiny. And in this judgment there is no partiality. So arm in arms with arms, we'll fight this little struggle. 'Cause that's the only way we can overcome a little trouble. Brother, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're so right. We gon' fight, we'll have to fight, we gonna fight, fight for our rights. Not to trade it in a Zimbabwe, set it up in Zimbabwe, mash it up in a Zimbabwe. Africans are liberate. Zimbabwe. No more internal power struggle. We come together to overcome the little trouble. Soon we'll find out who is the real revolutionary. 'Cause I don't want my people to be contrary. And brother, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're so right. We'll have to fight, we gonna fight, we'll have to fight, fighting for rights. Mash it up in a Zimbabwe, they trash it in a Zimbabwe. Africans are liberate Zimbabwe. I and I are liberate Zimbabwe. You're right, you're right, you're right, you're so right. We gon' fight, we'll have to fight, we gonna fight, fighting for rights. To divide and rule could only tear us apart. In every man chest, there beats are. So soon we'll find out who is the real revolutionaries. And I don't want my people to be tricked by mercenaries. Brother, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're so right. We'll have to fight, we gonna fight, we'll have to fight, fighting for rights. We trash it in a Zimbabwe, mash it up in a Zimbabwe, set it up in a Zimbabwe. Africans are liberate Zimbabwe, Africans are liberate Zimbabwe. Not it do bit in a Zimbabwe, set it up in a Zimbabwe. Africans are liberate Zimbabwe. Every man got a right to decide.
Yes, we've got about 30 to. Really?
In every American community, you have varying shades of political opinion. One of the shadiest of these is the liberals. An outspoken group on many subjects. 10 degrees to the left of center in good times, 10 degrees to the right of center if it affects them personally. So here then is a lesson in safe logic. I cried when they shot Medgar Evers. Tears ran down my spine. And I cried when they shot Mr. Kennedy, as though I'd lost a father of mine. But Malcolm X got what was coming. He got what he asked for this time. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Get it? I go to civil rights rallies and I put down the old DAR. DAR, that's the dikes of the American Revolution. I love Harry and Sidney and Sammy. I hope every colored boy becomes a star. But don't talk about revolution. That's going a little bit too far. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. I cheered when Humphrey was chosen, my faith in the system restored. And I'm glad that the commies were thrown out from the AFL-CIO board. And I love Puerto Ricans and Negroes, as long as they don't move next door. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Ah, the people of old Mississippi should all hang their heads in shame. Now I can't understand how their minds work. What's the matter, don't they watch Les Crane? But if you ask me to bus my children, I hope the cops take down your name. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Yes, I read New Republic and Nation. I've learned to take every view. You know, I've memorized Lerner and Golden. I feel like I'm almost a Jew. But when it comes to times like Korea, there's no one more red, white, and blue. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. I vote for the Democratic Party. They want the UN to be strong. I attend all the Pete Seeger concerts. He sure gets me singing those songs. And I'll send all the money you ask for, but don't ask me to come on along. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Sure, once I was young and impulsive, I wore every conceivable pin. Even went to socialist meetings, learned all the old Union hymns. Ah, but I've grown older and wiser, and that's why I'm turning you in. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal.
c'est la lutte finale. Groupons-nous et demain, l'international sera le genre humain. Arise, ye prisoners of starvation, arise, ye wretched of the earth, for justice thunders condemnation, a better world's in birth. No more traditions, chains shall bind us, arise, ye slaves, all war and thrall. The earth shall rise on new foundations. We have been not, we shall be all. It's the final conflict. Let each stand in place. The international shall be the human race. It's the final conflict. Let each stand in place. The international shall be the human race. We want no condescending saviors to rule us from their judgment hall. We workers ask not for their favors. Let us consult for all. To make the thief discharge his booty, to free the spirit from itself. We must ourselves decide our duty. We must decide and do it well. It's the final conflict. Let each stand in place. The international shall be the human race. It's the final conflict. Let each stand in place. The international shall be the human race. We toilers from all fields united, join hand in hand with all who work. The earth belongs to us, the workers. No room here for the shirk. How many on our flesh have fattened, but if the norsome birds of prey shall vanish from the sky some morning, the blessed sunlight then will stay. It's the final conflict. Let each stand in place. The international shall be the human race. It's the final conflict. Let each stand in place. The international shall be the human race.
Hello, everyone.
Echo.
Yeah. That was a bad move. I'm just, I'd like everyone who's participating in our next panel. Yeah. Oh, that was me.
Yeah.
Completely. Sorry.
That's
So,
okay.
I'd like our next panelist to get ready so we can go over the procedures. That's Barry, Stephen, and Wow.
Hey, Stephen.
I'm blanking on Sandra's name.
Hi there.
Hi, Stephen. Barry, are you with us?
Hi,
Hi,
Kurt.
Sandra.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Great, we got everybody on. Hey, Sandra.
Okay. So just going to go over this quickly. We do have quite a bit of time left, but might as well do it as early as possible. So Elizabeth is our host. She's going to do all the introductions. She's going to introduce each speaker one at a time. She'll inform you how much time you have for your speech. I know that can all of our members enter into the chat, please? Stephen, I see that you've already changed your name, Barry as well. So could you just say hi in the chat? Sandra, on the bottom left-hand corner, there's 2 squares and a hand. The first square is the chat box. So could you just click on that, put in your name? I'll ask for a nickname. Any name will do. And just
Am I still in there, Kurt? Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hi, Sandra.
And Stephen, can you do the same? Just say hi when in the chat. It's on the bottom left-hand corner. Sorry, Stephen, I don't see that you said hi.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I thought that was about, sorry. I will now say hi.
Just in the chat in there and just say.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were talking about the name, or getting the name up. So.
Yeah.
Just so folks know, we're broadcasting right now, right, Kurt?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Okay.
So the whole purpose of getting into the chat, and Julius, I know you're already in there as well, is so that I'm going to be directing you all from the chat. So Barry, I noticed that you went and got a pen and pad. I'll be posting all the questions in the chat itself. So if your vision's good enough, you may not need that. So after you've done your presentation, we will go to a Q&A session. I'll be taking questions from our viewing audience. I'll be posting the question in the chat, and I'll say the questions out loud for the sake of our audience. I'll be posting 3 questions at a time. You have the ability to answer any question, even if they're not directed to you. You have the right to refuse to answer any questions if you wish, or all questions if you wish, if you don't feel comfortable answering any of them. I will be controlling the camera, so you will be on camera when it's your turn to speak. And we'll be having moments of dead air, which is a good thing. We don't want to be talking over each other. And as a host, Elizabeth will be the one to fill that. So Elizabeth, if you have anything you want to go over.
Hi. Sorry, Kurt. Yeah, so no, I think you've covered it all. You know, when we get to the Q&A part of it, I will let you know at that time, depending on how many questions we've received, how much time you will have to answer each question. And I will give you the lineup of speakers for that round, who's first, second, third, and fourth to speak. And also you can answer all 3 questions each time, or no questions, or 1 or 2, even if the question is not put to you, but to another panelist, you can still answer it if you wish. So I think that's about it. We're going to start at it's 10 to now. Somebody's got a microphone on. I hear a lot of noise. And it would be good if we could keep our microphones muted when we're not talking. When you come on the screen, the big screen, you know that you're on. You can unmute yourself at that time. Let's see. Did we have people already waiting, correct, Kurt?
Yes.
So I think we're going to start. If all of our speakers are here, I think we'll get started at 5:02. Mm-hmm. Okay, at 5:02. Okay. So we will start our program at 5:02. So everybody should be in their places now. All speakers. Okay. That's it for me.
Okay, so Elizabeth,
Yes.
being as we're already here, so it'll be up to you to start whenever you wish. So just look at the time and go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I'll do so. So I'm going to start in 1 minute, folks. 1 minute. So welcome back, sisters, brothers, comrades, and friends to the Workers' Action Movement Conference, better known as WAM. For those newcomers to this part of the conference, my name is Elizabeth, and I will be your host. Also, we would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this event on Indigenous lands across Turtle Island, known as North America. That includes the unceded territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Wendat and Shawnee people in the place called Toronto. Today I'm speaking to you from Jamaica, where the indigenous Taino, Arawak-speaking people began arriving here 4,000 years ago, but were wiped out by the European colonial powers. We join in the fight for justice, recognizing there can be no real reconciliation without restitution. That entails seizing the assets of the big resource corporations and returning them to the commons. So the second part of our conference is titled Preparation for the Canadian Labour Congress Convention in June. And we have 4 speakers. We have Barry Conway, Senator Griffith Bonaparte, Stephen Crochet, and Julius Arscott. And they will be speaking for up to 15 minutes each. Then it will be followed by questions from the online audience, discussion, and motions probably to authorize our next step. So let's begin with the panel. So our first speaker is Barry Conway from CUPE, 5167 in Hamilton, and he's a past WAM candidate for president of the Ontario Federation of Labour, who received 36% support in 2019. Welcome, Barry.
Sorry, just had to find the unmute button. I always hate going first. I always like when other people take that on. Welcome, folks. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this panel. I've been on a few others with WAM before. Was really enjoying the discussion from the previous group. And I think there's some things to reflect on those discussions too when we talk about the CLC, people running and leadership positions. I think too, just running for the OFL presidency, a few things that come from that I keep in mind for the CLC stuff is how important it is for militant folks, rank and file folks, leftists to like genuinely run and to shift the narrative, shift the conversation at the convention. I think when we ran 2 years ago in 2019, there was this like growing kind of clash consciousness, this like understanding from workers that we actually need better representation, folks that are going to be in the trenches with them. We had a bunch of solidarity strikes with Cup W members and different things happening along those lines that really brought forward those conversations. And I think that's true now more than ever through this pandemic, that we actually need leadership within the CLC that isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. The leadership's been called out in that earlier panel, and I like stand by that too, where they're so disconnected, supporting Bill Morneau. I also advocate too that we don't need to put people in there that even support the NDP. I'm not here to support any politicians. I worry that if you elect that government, they're not even provincially, they're not going to get us back to before Harris times. Federally, not going to get us back to your pick. I think we need to elect leadership that stands on principled values of the labor movement and holds those conversations. That's going to continuously be organizing rank and file members to pick a fight with whatever government's in power and with whatever boss they have to support things like universal pharmacare and other issues related to the labor movement, to address anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, all the issues that we face as a broader movement. And we need to do it through ways that aren't directly, a ad campaign with a popsicle sticker. We need to do it where it is setting up models of organizing within workplaces that will ultimately have to bypass some union leadership. And I think that's very key too, because there's nothing but roadblocks and gatekeepers within this movement. And that's what we need to kind of put into position, these leadership positions, people that aren't afraid to address those concerns and to organize actual genuine rank and file members, because that's where the power is. That's where the power is in all unions. It's the membership, and they're continuously facing barriers. We need leadership that is going to stand up against any level of government, like when we saw further out west from myself in Ontario when they had the wildcat strike that was spoken about earlier in Alberta. We need that broader support from coast to coast, right? And that's why we're looking at like a CLC run on this. And we need like that diversity within there. So I think this is a frustrating part too. And it kind of goes back to those gatekeepers and roadblocks. When we were putting together the slate for the OFL, there's 3 positions that we're running. And we wanted people with solid politics and diversity. And Kurt and I ran, and we were looking for a 3rd person to run. And we got critiqued on the floor that why is there no women running? And the reality is, like, we actually had really good conversations with women with good politics that wanted to run and could not get a delegation to the OFL, could not get permission to run. And it's always the folks critiquing you that are the ones actually in place within their locals, putting up those roadblocks. And that's just what, like, amazes me. And that's why we need to build movements around rank and file folks that, you know, even if we aren't successful at the CLC or the OFL, that we continuously network, build up. I think the one thing about this pandemic has shown the ability to connect workers through Zoom, through Jitsi, through all these other apps is incredible. I've watched my partners local, I'm not going to get into the specifics for some political reasons, but they've had an increase in membership, attending meetings. They've had an increase. They created a BIPOC collective within their bylaws. There's the old, you know, toxic men that have been in the positions for 30 years are now being asked questions and being held accountable and are leaving, and we're seeing women of color take over. And I look at how beautiful it is, and I look how painful it is too within those growing opportunities, where I will say, like, there's these struggles between the BIPOC folks and, like, allies, and there's a lot of growing to do. There's a lot of learning to do. I've definitely most likely made mistakes as allies, as an ally myself. But I think we need to take that into account when we look at the CLC, is how do we empower folks? And we have to encourage everybody to participate. That this movement isn't a movement for just the old boys club that come there, you know, put down some motions and do all these maneuverings that maintain their political power. We have to put people forward that are going to challenge that. We have to support them. And we also have to find these ways of support with just in the lead up, because it's not easy running for positions. It is taxing on you emotionally and physically. And I think, like, that's one of the areas that, like, we need to improve upon within the labor movement is what are the supports behind the scenes that genuinely address some of these concerns for people wanting to run. And we are building towards that. I think, again, all these online conversations are assisting with that, this ability to meet where you don't have to be physically in the same space. It allows for people to meet with, like, their families around, include those, and broaden the conversations, because the labor movement impacts more than just the worker, it impacts the community, it impacts the family. And it's nice to see some of those barriers that are breaking down. But that's some of the stuff I think we need to be mindful of, like, when we're looking at how do we run people for the CLC, is to ensure that support network is there for folks. The assistance is needed, the ability to let other folks grow and create their own style of, like, leadership is extremely, extremely important. And it's okay not to win. I think that's something we need to, like, understand too, is breaking things down of what you feel like a success is, right? Like, I always run a campaign that I'm going, like, under the assumption that, like, I'm going to win, right? Because I need to mentally be in that space that it's like, I'm going to run this to win this campaign to get elected. But the reality is I most likely won't, and haven't, twice now haven't, but we've seen the numbers increase through each run. And we've also seen the politics of the institution shift because they've recognized that pressure that's been put on them through leftist politics, through this rise of some rank and file people wanting to participate in these broader labor struggles. And so although we weren't successful as a WAM slate at the OFL, we were successful in shifting conversations about what it looks like for general strike and to build it, what it looks like for genuine solidarity through social movements. And I think we're seeing it. I think the OFL's reluctantly done some things, but they have, right? They've supported defund the police. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Rishev, who's a young worker who was on that executive that pushed that through, right? So credit where credit is due. I think we need to recognize these folks within the movement that are building that. And we're also seeing in Ontario, there is a Indigenous dispute on a land claim that is called 1492 Land Back. Please check that out on social media. Folks have been occupying space for about 180 days now, and the OFL has stepped up to support it. They're getting propane out there every week to provide heat. They sent folks out there to help build stuff like on the area that like was needed specifically by that group that they asked. They kind of came there and helped deliver. I unfortunately legally can no longer attend the site. It is heavily monitored by the OPP and they are laying charges, but I think that's also things as a labor movement we have to talk about too, is let's get out there and let's put ourselves online and understand the privileges that we hold. But I hope that everybody here understands that you play a part within this movement. It is not just a movement for executives. It's not just a movement for white folks, that it is a collective movement, and we have to support everybody to participate in that, and we have to break down the barriers that are restricting, women from participating, that restricting LGBTQ people from participating, that restricting Indigenous folks, people of color, people with disability, and all those different intersectionalities that we really, as allies, need to just say, how the fuck do I hold this position of privilege, and how do I shift bylaws, meeting spaces, all these things so that other folks can participate, and then how do we build again that support system to keep them going. So I encourage anybody to get up there, participate, and hold leadership accountable. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Can't hear you, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, you're muted.
Okay, the host went and did it. All right, sorry about that. So our next speaker, and thank you, Barry. Our next speaker is Sandra Griffith Bonaparte. She's the president of UNDE Local 70607. She's a joint learning program facilitator. So welcome, Sandra. Okay, Sandra, you're on. Unmute yourself. You're muted.
Oh, she unmuted herself. There seems to be an issue with her volume, her ability to speak.
Okay, are you having a problem with your volume? Okay, so maybe what I'll do, Sandra, I will move on to the next speaker and come back to you so you can get this under control. Is that okay? Okay. All right, so we're going to move. Okay, we're going to move to Stephen Crochet, past president of New Westminster and District Labor Council, and in British Columbia, teacher. So, Stephen, you're on.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Barry, for going first. I know the feeling. I'm coming to you from the unceded traditional territory of the Semiahmoo people. part of the larger Coast Salish people here in BC. I'm going to go through it. It's an honor to be here, to be able to address you. I'm going to go through a little about the new Westminster and District Labour Council. I've just stepped down as president. In fact, I think I might still be president for another few days. Some of the present labor disputes in BC, some things about the BC Federation of Labor Campaigns. I'll touch on CLC. I actually thought Bill Morneau was the president, but I guess he was just the puppeteer. Some broader labor environmental issues in BC that will lead to broader labor issues, I hope, and a little bit about an assessment of the Team Unite, and some suggestions for WAM and the conference. So we'll start off with the new Westminster and District Labour Council, some of the issues that we're involved in: solidarity with Indian Farmers Movement, Black History Month event, Day of Mourning, Labor Day. We used to do a May Day with the Vancouver District Labour Council, but because CLC lost control of that, we no longer participate. The Day of Remembrance and Action on the Violence Against Women, we have a vigil. And then, of course, there are the other issues. Those are all events that we plan. Other issues about long-term care, sustainable communities, homelessness to housing, anti-poverty groups. Then we have the organizations like the Broadband Institute, the Tyee, BC Labor Heritage Center, et cetera, CCPA, Columbia Institute. Basically, I'm saying this because they do good things. That's about what I would say about the Labor Council. Also, there's support for the NDP MLAs and MPs. I'll talk a little bit about disputes that are happening. There's I think I'll skip over this first one. I'll just go, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers has been out of on the picket lines for 2 years now, over 2 years. And basically what's happening is, in behind the scenes, scab labor is doing the work that they should be doing for TELUS out here, the telecommunications company. Unite here just started a dispute with, or just walked off, pardon me, with Burnaby Hilton, the Hilton chain of hotels. They started on February 15th. Basically what's happening is that they're not extending the right of recall for workers, and this could affect some 2,000 workers in BC, mostly women. Move Up has a dispute that just started this last week with Kelowna Cabs. They're trying to outsource the dispatching to an overseas call center. So if you're in Kelowna, don't take a cab, walk, it's good for you. BC Federation campaigns, paid sick days now, women in trades, supporting women and getting more women into the trades. We had a convention last November, and the debrief just last week on it. It dealt with technical issues in an online convention, and there was nothing about the thought that there was the reality that there was no time to deal with resolutions. That's pretty typical in labor conventions and in political conventions. If you go there, there's a lot of speeches and a lot of ignoring thorny issues. The CLC just completed their Pacific Region Winter School out here. They're in Forward Together, which is sort of coming out of the pandemic in a way that's fair for everybody. And of course, we have Hassan Yousaf as our leader still. I won't go into details there. Everyone knows what happened, but there was an utter failure on the response from labor at all levels. CLC executive said that they disagreed with the endorsement, and I believe eventually they did rescind it. Affiliates said that they disagreed as well, and labor councils didn't want to disagree with the affiliates, so we disagreed with the endorsement as well. And Unifor was silent on the whole issue. Of course, the Unifor's Liberals, they might all be going for senatorships. I don't know. I was with other presidents in the Pacific region of the CLC trying to push to get Bill, pardon me, there's a slip of the tongue, trying to get Hassan Youssef removed from office. I mean, if we're going to be united, if we're going to have solidarity, we better have something to offer workers and the working class. And this idea of a weak response to something that was so against labor and the working class just was pathetic. Broader labor issues. Forestry has always been a large part of the economy here in BC. Horgan, whenever he went into office, said that there would no longer be logs sent offshore. Well, guess what? They continue today. Companies get $150 per log whenever they go offshore, and only $100 per log whenever they go to the dwindling number of sawmills that we have here in BC. The government doesn't have control. They're not taking control. Basically, we have 5 companies. They call them the 5 amigos, and they have control over the forestry industry. We'll never stop raw logs going offshore unless we get control over that. And the United Steelworkers are basically the union in the forestry industry. They wrote a paper called Forestry Resuscitation in 2019. There were 8 recommendations, but not one of them was to call the 5 amigos what they are, the 5 banditos, run them out of town and replace them with worker co-ops. I mean, get rid of them. I don't know why we have our livelihoods depending on international corporations that are just there for profit. It's ridiculous. We do all the work. Site C just announced that it will be continued this week. It's going to be costing $16 billion now, not $8.8 billion. When the NDP took over in 2017, the Liberals had spent $2 billion, and it would have been about $1 to $2 billion. I think it was $1.2 billion to restore the Peace River Valley. Right now, they've sunk 6 projects, and it would cost $10 billion to restore it, and supposedly 4,500 jobs would be lost. I mean, I don't know how they think they're going to restore the Peace River Valley without workers, but so I don't know how they get this figure that those are the jobs that are going to be lost. The power coming from Site C will be more expensive than power coming from solar farms in Alberta right now, which in fact it'd be 10 times the expense. There's a problem that was known about building this dam on shale rock. This was known back in the 90s, and lo and behold, I mean, the strange thing is that the dam is actually being built to support the LNG and fracking industry in that area of BC, and the fracking industry is actually causing earthquakes that are causing cracks in the dam. They knew this would happen. However, they continue to sink money into it. So I will just continue. This is to say nothing about the rights of Indigenous people that are being trampled on there, and the destruction of farmland, which is very necessary in that area. The farmland could provide food for 1 million people. Fracking and LNG, again, hugely subsidized. And in terms of revenue for the province, there's more tobacco, they make more revenue from tobacco tax, about 700 million a year, than methane royalties. And I think it's time, instead of calling it natural gas, that we called it what it is. It's methane, 25 times the potency of CO2 as the greenhouse gas. Way more money made from tobacco tax, and hey, people are cutting back on tobacco. During that time, royalty payment, so that's from 2016 till now. Royalty payments have always been less than forecasted, except for 2016-17. And the, yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the time here. And these companies get royalty tax credits, and always more than is forecast. So I would just say that what's happening is that the BC government is pouring money into LNG to make it competitive. And what we have to realize is that if you're pouring money into it, it's not competitive. So let's get the hell out. I will go on to, yeah, so just this idea that that we're pouring money into something and supporting international corporations. And the carrot is that it's providing jobs. There is so much work to be done. Why we have to stop making ourselves dependent on international corporations for our livelihoods. We have to take control over what those things are. With the LNG, there was a study that was done. I can't remember, unfortunately, I couldn't find it last night, but economically and environmentally, we'd be further ahead to pay workers $1 million a year to stay home. So that gives us an idea of where we're at. Broader issues. Okay, socialism was bought off with the New Deal, so we can't allow that to happen with the Green New Deal or the just transition or whatever you want to call it. We lost in the globalization movement starting in the 80s. We continue to lose because we don't have the strong enough international solidarity with other workers around the world. And yes, I think that we should start looking at labor as being an essential part of the means of production. Without us, nothing gets made or done. And that leads into some of the problems that we have with automation. I think we should stop opposing it. It's a reality. It's something that should be making our jobs easier. What we need to do is take control over it. Part of that is to get a shorter working week. No one should lose their job because of automation. The green economy is something where we're very split on, and we're lacking solidarity here. We need to figure out what is needed. Workers are going to build the green economy, and we have to take control once again of that. The gig economy, same sort of thing. We need to have unionization there. People have to realize that they're not entrepreneurs whenever they're delivering pizza. They're just low-paid workers. Team Unite, they've got endorsements. I read their statements. Once again, their statements look very much like what the issues are that the NDP, the New West and District Labor Council is involved in. And there's nothing new. There are no calls to action in their statements. I read their statements as well. And once again, there's no, I like their third one, which is basically unity through engagement. It's all about unity, but as Barry Weisletter said, what are we uniting over? Unity through engagement, changing the labor status quo through an active and engaging working class, collective strategies, work together, reactivate, rebuild. And I translated that into just use conceptual language that makes people feel good. This is the status quo. This is exactly what has been happening for years, and it's a failure. There's nothing about action, no call to action whatsoever. They did a presentation at the Labor Council, and the only thing that that they sort of said was going to be a change was that they would reconnect with the federal NDP as a party. And I guess the Liberal, I guess they're not interested in becoming senators. I'm not sure. What does WAM have to do? Basically, we need to concentrate on action. We need to figure out what we're uniting around. I think I'm running out of time. I'll just throw out a few things. we have to work with unions and government to nationalize extraction and manufacturing sectors and or create worker co-ops in those areas, and starting with the companies that are presently totally dependent on government subsidies for their existence. And we should also, we need to devise and implement a plan for that the just transition to a green economy. I mean, it's been there for a long time, except there's really no plan. There's just words, empty words.
30 seconds.
Shorter work week. We need to unionize the gig workers. Of course, we have to have campaigns like taxing the wealthy, establish an investigative arm to look into the loopholes that exist in the law. And then here's the final thing I'll say is that we need to establish an international arm to work with labor activists worldwide to establish worker power as the primary globalization initiatives, so that working families, communities, and environment take precedence in international decisions. So we have to campaign. We have to get pride in being the working class. We don't climb up the greasy pole of management and or ownership.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
Thank you. So I think our producer is still working with our panelist, Sandra, to try to get her back online. So we're going to move.
Sandra's here, so check to see if her Sandra.
Oh, well, I wish you would have told me, brother producer.
All right, Sandra.
Okay. All right. So Sandra, are you there?
I'm here. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am. So I'm going to introduce you again, sister. Sandra Griffith Bonaparte. She's the president of UNDE Local 70607. She's a joint learning program facilitator. So welcome, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for introducing me. And thank you so much, Kurt, for really helping me through, because you couldn't hear me. And thanks for, putting somebody in front of me so that we can work on this problem. So first of all, yes, I'm the president of UNDE Local 70607, which is one of the largest locals in UND of over 2,000 members. And prior to the pandemic, we had, or actually prior to moving to Carlin campus, we had 23 different buildings that we represented. So I'm from Public Service Alliance of Canada. My component is UNDE. So you have the big umbrella of PSAC and then UNDE below. The Public Service Alliance of Canada represent 100,000 federal public service workers under the Treasury Board of Canada in every province and territory in this country. In a time of a pandemic when PSAC should have been on top of their game, they were not. Many private companies were ready to roll out the emergency plan, but not our union. Instead, they were unprepared. Just imagine, since the pandemic, they have not even rolled out an online training for their members. We have so many new shop stores who need training, who need development, who need advice. And yet for all, a year to date since the pandemic, there is no training available. And this is quite unacceptable for a big union like the PSAC. As a matter of fact, I've not seen any effort to mobilize and even to organize anything at all. Only recently I got a communique from PSAC, and then somebody sent me an email. Oh, we know you live in Orleans, and right now we want you to come and support us to write your MP about some issue. And I'm saying to myself, no, because a year has passed and you haven't done anything. I'm beginning to think that the people we elect is not doing their work, but obviously passing the work back to the membership when they cannot do it. When I returned to my office as president, that's just last month, I called the PSAC to find out of their plans for training. and they said they had no plans. They're thinking about doing some online training, but it's not rolled out yet. And I said to the person, I said to the rep there, you thinking? I said, a whole year. I said, listen, I just came back to my local and we need training. As a matter of fact, we just chose a new chief shop steward and we need to train her before she can do her work. But to no avail. I heard on Friday they're planning on rolling out something pretty soon, but let's wait and see. I'm just going to talk a bit about bargaining. When PSSC sent out its bargaining call out to each component, the component in turn will send out the bargaining call out to the locals. So every local is asked to submit bargaining demands. And if a local did not send out a demand, then they did not attend the bargaining conference. I was lucky that my local sent out some demands in the last round of bargaining. The component then goes through the demands and set the priorities. Locals were given the opportunity to send the names of the members to each component, 3 from each bargaining team from every local. Like we have the PA, we have the TC, we have the SVs, and then we have the EVs. They were chosen to attend the bargaining conference. In the last round of bargaining, I was chosen to attend the UND bargaining conference. So first you have your component bargaining conference. At the conference, I noticed that deals were made and you had campaigning, lobbying, politicking. And at the end of the conference, the best politicians were chosen to attend the PSAC bargaining conference. At the bargaining conference, I noticed that, names were going on the board. As a matter of fact, I was the only person of color attending that conference. And I noticed that people politicking and putting names of their friends, not because they had the skills, but because the person was a friend. And I said, there's not even a racially visible person on that board. And so I had to think fast, and I submitted my daughter's name, not because she was my child, no kind of nepotism here, but because I thought that she had the aptitude to do good bargaining. And so I submitted her name. And to my amazement, I had to talk on her behalf, and she was chosen to be on the bargaining team who would attend PSAC bargaining conference. Unfortunately, she got a better job, and so she left DND. And she was replaced by an alternate. And guess what? From UND, we had no racially visible person going to attend the PSAC bargaining conference. From what I observed, I believe PSAC did their due diligence in involving the membership because, yes, they sent out the demands to the component, and the component in turn sent it out to the locals. And the locals in turn had to choose their members, which my executive did. I would say that every table had an equal opportunity to lobby for its members. Was it organic? Maybe not. In my opinion, I believe that a lot of individuals ended up on the bargaining team because of, I would say, nepotism or cronyism, rather than having the skills to negotiate or bargain. And as I said before, I lobbied for my daughter, and she got in. So many individuals in our union do not have the equity lens, and that's very sad. Many individuals, we cannot win our struggle if we don't have that equity lens, if we don't involve, and I'm not just saying Black workers or workers of color, but if we don't involve every single worker. We are a union, and we're here to represent every worker. But what we notice is that mostly, and I'm saying candidly, that mostly white workers are represented. They get to do everything. They get to go everywhere. Their input is very important. But many times you have people of color, they are left out. They're left out. Even when they're there, nobody listens to them. Nobody wants to put them forward for whatever reason, and so the struggle goes on. We have to, if we need to win the struggle, we have to involve every member, all members, every member in a meaningful way. in order to gain improvement in a union. On December 10th, 2019, I got into, and I wouldn't even call it an altercation. We had a discussion in our president's, we call it ogle meeting. And so me and another employee got into, a discussion, I would call it. But he got angry, and so he was talking down to me and swearing. And at the end of everything, he and another member filed a complaint that I said, "You people," which I didn't do. So on March 25th, I was suspended from office for something that I did not do. At the investigation, we had an all-white committee who didn't even listen to me. And from their body language, I could see, I could read, that we don't care to listen to you. I mean, you're an abuser. To make a long story short, and I'm not going to talk very loud. I'm not going to talk very long. To make a long story short, I was suspended, as I say, for approximately 11 months. And it was supposed to be like from March to the end of December. But I had to attend this course, in order to get back into my local. At first I said, I'm not going to attend any course. I don't care if I get back. But then, speaking to Barry, who represented me, he said, Sandra, you have to get back in your local as the president and represent your members fully. And so I took that under consideration. And after thinking for a long time, I decided to go back. And see, one of the reasons I didn't want to go back is because the impact that these lies had on me. And during the investigation, Barry was representing me, and I suffered a stroke during the investigation. As a matter of fact, I suffered 2 strokes that very day, And so I decided, you know what? I don't have to deal with the union. If they would behave in such a manner, I'll just forget all about it. But from, listening to Barry, the advice he gave me, I returned to the union. But before I went back, I had to attend this course. It was mandatory for me, but optional for all the other people in the meeting. And you can see how unfair this is,
4 minutes, sister.
Oh, 4 more minutes? We had a training, and it was a healing circle. During the training, which is a form of a healing circle, I was surprised when my accuser said he retracted his statement. He said, I went back to them and I said, I did not hear her say the things that I said she said. The only thing I heard was people. He said, Sandra, did anybody contact you? And I said, no. But to me, right now it's water under the bridge. I didn't want to go back there at all. So I called the president of the UND and I said, so-and-so said that they retracted. She said, well, this is news to me. Who did he retract to, But in any event, I have returned to the office of the president of my local. In my first week, I got over 15 requests from people who had issues in the workplace. And even the president of the component said, oh, I'm so happy you're back. Because guess what? No other body was as dedicated as I was to the membership and to the cause. So how do we plan to combat bigotry and victimization in the future? You see, systemic discrimination is ubiquitous. It's all over. It's ingrained in every aspect of our lives. It is systemic. We all know how, to dismantle systemic discrimination. For me, I managed to get my executive to be primarily racially or workers of color with one white person there. People didn't like that. My local plans to work hard in stamping out racism in our union by having seminars and educational to teach not only the history of racism, but to teach our members how to stand up and speak out and to stamp out racism. We have been discussing how we need to put in resolutions to change the PSSC constitution because that constitution is racist. And I'm telling you, in the past, I submitted some resolutions and guess what? My mouth is dry, so sometimes it sticks. Guess what? PSSC ruled it out of order. So it's very hard for us to put in resolutions. We could put it in, but it's not going to go anyway. You know, this kind of behavior has no place in the union, but it's there.
1 minute, sister.
Yes, we need to elect workers who are just, who want justice, and who are conscious-minded that bigotry and racism has no place in a union. And that's why we need socialist action. That's why we need WAM to help us plan how we could stand up the PSSC, how we could get them to change this old constitution that they wouldn't change at all. You know, I want to thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, sister, for being on the panel. Okay, so now we're going to move to Julius Arscott, who is an executive board member of Ontario Public Service Employees Union Region 5 and a WAM steering committee member. Julius?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So first, I want to thank all the wonderful speakers who have participated in today's Workers' Action Movement conference. We've gained much insight into current bargaining issues, into the fight against privatization and the fight for equity. We have heard about rank and file initiatives and taking the struggle for collective bargaining rights to the next level through actions deemed illegal by the boss's laws. We've heard about the need to fight for eco-socialist policies within our labor movement and about the steps needed in the weeks ahead leading into the CLC convention and beyond. There's no doubt that there is an appetite for serious change in our labor movement. What's lacking is leadership. We strive to help build the leadership to change our labor movement for a better world for the working class and humanity. The Canadian Labour Congress, the central labour body in Canada, will meet in convention in mid-June to adopt policy and to elect its officers for the next 3-year term. We need to ensure that WAM has a presence at the convention, however challenging that may be, since the convention will be online. One focus of the convention will likely be constitutional amendments. They address union representation at conventions. The proposed amendments may also address the issue of union raiding. A raid involves one union campaigning to recruit members of another union. Such attempts, which are rarely initiated by the workers themselves, serve only to divide the ranks of labor. The efforts of unions should go into organizing the unorganized. 68% of workers in Canada do not belong to a union. That's what must change, which union raiding does not help. So far, we know of one opposition slate of candidates, Team Unite CLC 2021, the so-called Reform Slate. It consists of Bay Bursk for CLC President, Lily Chang for CLC Secretary Treasurer, and Shoban Vipon for CLC Executive Vice President. Like the previous so-called Reform Slate, the current reformers, like the previous so-called Reform Slate, headed in 2014 by the current CLC President Hassan Youssef, the current reformers present no meaningful program. They do not represent any real change to status quo business unionism. None of the candidates have championed the fight for no concessions bargaining, for greater union democracy, for mass job action to fight capitalist austerity, for anti-racism, for eco-socialism, to defund the police, or for any substantial challenge to business unionism within their own unions. None of them calls for a break with the so-called strategic voting, a rejection of the Liberal Party, and a commitment to support the New Democratic Party while fighting inside the NDP for socialist policies and a workers' agenda. So why should we expect them to do so as leaders of the CLC, especially without any commitment or program for change as part of their current campaign? The election of the Reform Slate would result in the same old class collaboration. What we need is exactly the opposite of the status quo. It's time for serious change. Only WAM can offer that alternative. The actions of the current president of the CLC, Hassan Youssef, are symptomatic of a deeper problem. Youssef's reform campaign challenged Ken Giorgetti and his leadership as a result of rank-and-file activists campaigning under the banner of Hassan Husseini. Sadly, Husseini withdrew his candidacy to support Youssef. Youssef's election soon folded into the status quo. After Unifor, the union in which Hassan belonged, left the House of Labor, the Labor leadership quickly found a union card for Hassan. He was then beholden to the Labor establishment. Hassan's inaction in the face of the global pandemic and his endorsement of former Liberal Finance Minister Bill Morneau for the leadership of the OECD reflect an indifference to the needs of workers. All of this happened after the CLC leadership succumbed to pressures of Canadian imperialism and condemning brother Donald Lafleur of the CUPW for visiting Syria for a labor conference, which he did on his own time. Workers want a union movement that is engaged in the class struggle. We need a movement that takes a leading role in fighting the pandemic and eco-catastrophe head on. We see an example of this in the Wildcat hospital support workers walkout by AUPE members in Alberta, and the no concessions fight of the locked out Molson workers of CUBGW Local 326, who rejected a rotten final offer and who are now on the picket line. We honor the workers of color who continue to fight systemic racism in the workplace and in our unions without the support of union leadership, which Sandra is doing at PSAC. We are inspired by the millions of workers who hit the streets in support of Black Lives Matter, the largest demonstrations in the history of the United States. WAM unequivocally supports the call for defunding, disarming, and abolishing the police of the boss's state. The CLC should echo the call made by the multiracial youth and working class of North America, led by Black youth and crystallized in the slogans, Black Lives Matter, defund the police, and fuck white supremacy. There's a visible shift in the consciousness in the workers' movement as the material conditions of a public health crisis and economic depression unfold. Communities across North America demand an end to police repression and their invasive presence in our spaces. Recent analysis shows that someone is killed by the police every 12.6 days in Canada. Indigenous and Black youth are by far the most likely to be killed by police. White people in Canada are by far the least likely to be killed by the police proportionately. The police are not workers. They have no place in our union movement. Workers here support land back initiatives in support of Indigenous peoples. Workers want to fight for a better world. Indeed, the unionization rate increased during the pandemic with efforts to unionize precarious workers who don't belong to unions. Companies like Amazon are in the telescopic crosshairs of union organizers. Workers across the country are on the front lines fighting COVID-19 with inadequate support from our labor movement. The vaccination delays, the lack of personal protective equipment and paid sick leave, the overall priority of profits over human needs, with the spotlight on the most precarious and vulnerable workers keeping the economy moving, have all shown the need for a dramatic change in labor union priorities and leadership. Workers want to fight against concessions bargaining, against 2- and 3-tier wages and benefits, against tax on our pension plans. We see how difficult it is to live in a society with such a high cost of living, while most of our union leaders continue to tell us to settle for less, insisting that we cannot win by standing up. A common phrase we're now hearing is that after the pandemic, we must build back better. Many of the problems that we face today are the result of the conditions working people face for decades. It is not realistic to assume anything will change as a result of the status quo leadership. Change does not occur without struggle, like some mythical gift from the boss. It comes through working class struggle, as it always has. The misleadership of our movement has proven unwilling to mobilize the ranks of labor to fight to defend our rights, let alone to fight for substantial gains. WAM is working with the Toronto-based May Day Committee, a movement of labor and left activists and organizations. We have been able to tie International Workers' Day to the working class in a way which has not been done in generations. And we encourage all of you to get involved as well. Major unions and labor bodies such as the OFL, that's the Ontario Federation of Labor, have endorsed May Day Rally 2021. We in WAM support international working class campaigns such as Global Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions campaign against the Israeli apartheid state, and for solidarity with the huge struggle of India's farmers. It's undeniable. The Workers' Action Movement made a major impact at the Ontario Federation of Labor Convention in November 2019. WAM played a leading role in defeating a constitutional amendment to hold OFL conventions every 3 years instead of the existing frequency of every 2 years. The change would have further undermined the democratic process in our labor movement, further weakening our ability to take on the Doug Ford-led Tories and their Bay Street backers. This was a big blow to the labor bureaucracy, which usually gets its way. WAM candidate for OFL President Barry Conway of QP Local 5167 received 36% of the votes cast, and WAM candidate for OFL Executive Vice President Kurt Young from Sheet Metal Workers Local 30 received 33.5% of the votes cast. Barry's support doubled from the 2017 OFL convention when he ran independently for president. This substantial vote for each of the two WAM candidates set a high watermark for class struggle politics and the Ontario labor movement. The convention atmosphere was electric during the debate on the so-called OFL action plan. Our supporters were able to extend the time for debate on the plan of action until every delegate who wished to speak on it was able to do so. We narrowly lost a vote to include general strike language in the text. WAM played a leading role in organizing on the floor, working alongside allies and friends to challenge business unionism in a way not seen at OFL conventions in many years. Establishment forces, led by school support worker Patty Coates, who won the presidency, were visibly shaken by the sizable support won by the WAM ticket. WAM campaigned for an end to concessions bargaining, two-tier wages, undemocratic union practices, and for building towards a general strike to dump Doug Ford. And I encourage folks to check out our website for more details. That's www.thewam.ca. During the convention, dozens of delegates signed up to join WAM. To this date, the OFL leadership has not acknowledged the existence, let alone the significance of the opposition team. But we thank everyone who propelled a remarkable campaign in the OFL. Now, we believe, is the time to organize an electoral slate for the CLC convention, which will occur in June of this year. As resolutions must be submitted by the top officials of affiliated unions, it is almost impossible to get WAM resolutions on the agenda. We will change that in the future. For the time being, we encourage all our supporters who are in unions to contact their unions to ask to become a delegate. Please let us know if you are or can become a delegate to the CLC. We can intervene in debates on issues as they come to the virtual floor of convention. We plan to run candidates for the top 4 CLC executive positions: president, secretary, treasurer, and the 2 vice president positions. We want a strong, militant, grassroots team that reflects the diversity of our movement. The number of candidates we run will be determined by the folks who step forward now to run. It is preferable that candidates be delegates to the convention. However, it appears that it may not be necessary as long as you belong to a union affiliated to the CLC. It would be much preferable to be a delegate, though. I'm a member of the OPSU Executive Board. OPSU is a component of NUPG. I'm prepared to run for a top CLC executive post. And now, WAM needs to know this. Who here is willing to join me to be a candidate on the WAM team? Dare to struggle, dare to win. Let's build WAM together. Solidarity.
Excellent presentation, Julius. Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to move into our questions from the audience. And I'm going to turn it over to our producer, Kurt, and we will be asking 3 questions in the first round. And the lineup to speak will be Stephen, Sandra, Julius, and Barry. So you can answer all questions if you wish, or any one of them. Even if it's directed to a certain person, you can still answer. And you will have up to 4 minutes each to do so. Okay, Kurt?
Okay, our first question comes from Jason G, and he asks, in light of the Alberta provincial government's plan to privatize most health services, anything going on with that? Petitions online, for example? And Alex Reevy asks, in Alberta, there is a large rejection of coal mines on the eastern slope. Conflict between employees of local coal mines and environmentalists make a difficult bridge to build. The local UMW former president is now a main lobbyist for coal mine companies. How would labor reps here address that? And Daniel Terade asks, from what I understand, candidates for CLC position do not necessarily need to be a delegate to the CLC. Can we use this to our advantage?
Okay, so you each have 4 minutes. Stephen.
Hi, I think I'll skip on the first question because that really has to do with Alberta, and I'm not that familiar with it. As for the second question, although it also has to do with Alberta, it definitely ties into a larger problem that we have as a labor movement. That is that we have people, workers, dependent on extraction and the fossil fuel industry for their paychecks. And we have corporations that are actually controlling what gets developed and what doesn't. That's also backed up by banks and insurance companies, and it all has to do with profit. It really is not for supporting environmental issues, which are so important, or supporting communities or workers. The value is in the work itself, and what's happening is that corporations and owners are capturing what that value is. They don't create jobs. The work is there to be done. The value is in the work itself. And what these corporations are doing is taking the shortest route to profit that can be taken. If we did have, that's why I was saying that it's so important to develop a plan for a just transition. If we did have a plan of that sort, workers would not be dependent on these corporations for their livelihood. And that's the move that we have to make. We need to have public ownership of these resources so that we can do the right thing and put people, as they say, before profit. Corporations are never going to do that. But we need to have a realistic plan, meaning that we have to be listening to workers in those sectors in order to see what it is that they need in order to make those transitions. So yeah, basically we need public ownership. We need workers to be controlling what those sectors are. We can't have them being controlled by international corporations. The last question, which had to do with the CLC, and if we're not a delegate, can we use that to our advantage? I'm not sure I have an answer for that one either. I can think about it, I guess, briefly. Let's just say I don't think it necessarily has to be a disadvantage. As long as we're allowed to speak, we have to realize what we're running our slate for, and that is to raise awareness of issues and to give delegates and the working class an opportunity for change, an opportunity to vote for change and to reject the status quo. That being the case, I don't think that we necessarily have to be delegates in order to do that. Especially in this kind of a convention, which is going to be online. It's different if you're on the floor and you can talk to people In this case, it's going to be a little bit different in terms of a convention, I think. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Sandra?
Stephen, I was going to answer the last one, but Stephen made the point that I want to make. So you could go ahead to the next person.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Julius?
Yeah, I just want to address a few things. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with what's happening campaign-wise in Alberta. What I can tell you is that as an executive board member of OPSU, that we are watching what's happening there. We have a huge hospital division within my union, the Ontario Public Service Employees Union. And so whenever, and of course we have a conservative as our premier as well. So when things happen in Alberta, we pay attention if we have the same kind of government. That's about all I can say on that. In regards to workers in the extraction industry, resource industry, and conflicts with environmentalist movements, this is something that has been going on for a long time. And many of us who are involved in the NDP, for instance, saw this debate go down several years ago when the LEAP manifesto was brought to the floor for discussion and adoption. And actually, it was in Alberta when the resolution came forward. And much, not all, but much of organized labor, folks who did work or were in parts of the country that really did rely on the extraction industry, opposed it. And our argument is an eco-socialist argument, which means that in order to make these kind of fundamental changes, we need to democratize the economy, which means that in order to get away from those kind of extractive jobs, we need to nationalize green technology under workers and community control, and produce or allow the ability for the production of solar panels, of green vehicles, of windmills, you name it, in areas that are going to be affected as a replacement for those extractive industries. And that's not something that the labor leadership is willing to really take on at this time. But that doesn't stop us from talking about it and promoting the idea. The other item that I wanted to mention is the question about the CLC convention and whether or not our candidates need to become delegates. There's no doubt that a delegate will not have the possibility of any sort of technical or practical barrier to run. So it is much preferable that our candidates be delegates. That being said, there's no language in the CLC constitution that forbids non-delegates from running. The complexity is that it's going to be online. It'll be difficult, I imagine, to interrupt the chair on an online conference with thousands of delegates to try to get my point, to get our point of order across to run somebody if they're not willing to accommodate us, and they frankly are not going to want to accommodate us. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Barry?
Yeah, excellent question. So thank you folks for asking those. I can't speak also really well to the first one with regards to, is there any plans around the privatization of health services, other than I think, if we're putting a team together for the CLC, that it is something we need to understand what is happening there and have our own platform on to come up with a plan. Because I don't think there's currently one by the bureaucratic leadership. So something that I think folks need to take away from here to address these concerns. With regards to the other issue in Alberta around the coal mines and environmentalists, I think we're seeing similar conflicts with folks setting up protests to block items being produced that go into arms productions that are then sent to Saudi Arabia. And I think when we start looking at these things too, one, especially with the specific question around coal mines and environmentalists, is we actually have the ability to switch over to green energy, renewable energy. And I think what we need to do is have these conversations with those workers to say, you actually play a part in that switch, right? And I think there needs to be a push from labor to say that, like, look, these workers that are currently in this industry, how do we retrain them? How do we move them over? How do we keep those union wages, the same benefits, the vacation stuff? And that has to be part of the conversation, that like you workers can come over with like this new Green Deal, that you're not going to be left behind. Because I think that's oftentimes the fear from these workers is like, this is my livelihood. And these are real questions. But it's like, okay, this is your livelihood for the next 20, 25 years. But what about the livelihood of the next generation and those environmental impacts that are killing people, that are causing, early deaths within those workers through health complications? And these are the conversations we need to take place to say that you specifically play a role in collectively saying, as a worker of these mines, that like, look, I actually want us to get out of this industry, and put that push on there to say, like, let's get these, green jobs in, and let's get retrained on it. Let's take our skill set over, let's take our union wages over, our benefits over. And I think other folks kind of answered the stuff better than I could, and as well. So I'll end there.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry. Okay, so now we're going to move into our second round of questioning, and you will have there will be 3 questions, and you have up to 4 minutes, and the list will be Sandra, Julius, Barry, and Stephen. Kurt, questions, please?
Hold on. Okay, so our first question comes from Alex Padilla. Yes. Barry, is it true that you are an anarchist? If so, how does this affect your work in the labor movement and working with people with slightly different political views like socialists? Spencer Roki asked, do you see unions becoming more active in social advocacy issues like Black Lives Matter, Original Peoples Colonization, LGBT+, and feminist issues, etc., where they would be synonymous with leftist activism? JG asked, when it comes to labor and jobs, what is the perspective on creative work, i.e. writing, art, music, etc.? All these careers, whether freelance or employed, being supported alongside traditional jobs.
Okay, the questions are in the chat. You have 4 minutes, and the first speaker is Sandra.
The questions. I can't even see. Where am I? Hello?
Yes, you're here. I hear you.
Okay, so Kurt, could you repeat question 2, please?
Says, do you see unions becoming more active in social advocacy issues like Black Lives Matter, Original Peoples Colonization, LGBT+, and feminist issues, etc., where they would be synonymous with leftist activism?
I'll answer question 2. Yes, I see unions becoming more involved in these areas because there's a need to support. We see that in the last year, what happened across the border with Floyd, with the police having his foot on his neck, and we noticed that the unions got more involved. We're diverse, and you have diverse people in the union. And I think if the union is going to survive, they need to step up. And I think they would step up.
Okay. Thank you, Sandra. Julius?
Yeah, I'll address the last issue a little bit when it comes to folks who working in creative work. There are some unions that deal with workers who do creative work, such as writing, art, music, acting. But I think that actually, as a field of work, that I would imagine that a lot of these workers are underrepresented in the labor movement. Just from what I see attending labor meetings, whether or not it be the Toronto York Region Labor Council, the Ontario Federation of Labor, or the Canadian Labor Congress. Of course, all of these workers should have representation. You know, the old, the idea that, you know, we're much stronger together than we are apart certainly applies to these folks. I mean, the idea of the starving artist, it still exists today, you know, and it shouldn't be that way, because we see art as part of our world all around us. Certainly the ruling class uses art to make their billions and trillions of dollars, and that money is not passed down to those who do the creative work. So they do need better representation than they currently have. I would just say, just a short comment around what Sandra was saying. I think it's great that if it is true that the labor movement is becoming more of an advocate for social issues such as Black Lives Matters, but my experience is that often what happens is that the labor leadership, their level of support will extend to a financial contribution, keeping arm's length to grassroots movements, claiming that they don't want to get involved, and that they basically prevent the organized workers within the labor movement from working directly with these grassroots activists. Many of the time they're students, and it's a barrier. So that needs to change. I mean, labor's financial contributions or material contributions to these movements are good, but it's not nearly as much as it could be in supporting these movements and for them to have a much longer standing impact on society.
Okay, thank you, Julius. Barry?
Thank you. So I guess I'll have to answer the first question. I don't think other people are going to jump in on that one for me. Yes, I'm an anarchist. How does this affect my work within the labor movement? I actually don't even think it's weird, because that's kind of categorical. So I think within like the broader labor movement, it doesn't affect my work. I think, like folks like Socialist, we're out at anti-fascist demos together. We're out at Black Lives Matters protests together. Indigenous solidarity, like Shut Down Canada actions together. So within like those realms, I don't think it generally affects stuff. I think it just adds an additional layer of perspective and conversation, which is healthy, right? Because we're working through a democratic process. And then so although I may advocate for consensus-based decision-making, the reality is like we operate, through like a voting mechanism and whatnot. And so I don't think it hinders when we're connecting with other activists, with like rank and file folks, where it becomes an issue. So I'll talk about my own local. I sit on the executive, and I think it's negative. I don't even know if it's negative effect. It's just frustrating for me personally, where I think people don't actually know what anarchism is. I think it's like this chaos. It's all this. It's like, well, no. And like, try to talk to people. It's like, I really just don't like oppressive systems. And so I'll be like working through a motion that tries to get more rank and file involvement. And then people that gatekeep within the local will be like, this is just part of your anarchist agenda. Or I'll bring up, we should do a motion that supports like defund the police. This is just part of your anarchist agenda, and I think like people just use that as a way to like dismiss it, which is fine. It just creates a longer conversation because I'm not going to walk away from that. So that's where we have those issues. But it's then really interesting with like the rank and file, because we won't always agree on things, but then they're the ones that like when they get in shit, they're like, I want Barry because he's going to fight like tooth and nail against the boss. for this. And it's also, I think, shifted some people's views. So I have charges for assault as a Pride defender, where some homophobic preachers came to Hamilton Pride in 2019. Anyways, I got charges from there. I don't want to go into it. The legal stuff's coming up. So it hit the CBC in Hamilton, an article just this week. And I'm kind of support from workers who I didn't think I'd get support from, like workers who I argue with all the time around political issues. And they're like calling me and leaving messages like, I saw the article and I support what you fucking did. That's like good. And it's like, okay, so it's like, this is actually shifting folks and things like that. So it's really interesting. After I was arrested for allegedly participating in a rail blockade, one of our shop stewards told me I would have driven through a blockade, and we then went and had breakfast. And now I talk to this person once a week, and he's a strong advocate within the workplace, and we just build these things. So I think it's a positive, just like socialism is a positive within like the movement, right? I'm not here to shit on any other leftists, and I think like we need to build and accept and understand. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Stephen? Stephen, 4 minutes.
Yeah, so, geez, Barry, I wish you hadn't answered that. I was going to jump in. Good job. The second question, I thought Sandra gave excellent answers. I'll just add a little bit, and that is, I think this is a place that we have to move towards, this idea of social unionism and not business unionism. And it goes along very well with our principles, one being solidarity. You can't have solidarity if some of those sectors or some of the working people do not have equal power. And so that's you build it through equality and democratization. So it's all about empowerment. These are things that we stand for. So absolutely, I see this as a direction that that the union movement has to move in. And then on the last one, interesting, and thank you, Julius, for your answers here. I see money as a kind of the grease on the wheels of our economy. Arts is a low impact economy, part of the economy, and it adds so much value to our lives. So we have to recognize that so moving into that area and encouraging the improvement and the broader use of art in various ways is really important. We really have to look at the value, as I say, that adds to our lives. And so one of the problems, and I have that in my own faculty association, that is that teachers tend to be very independent. And so they don't see themselves as workers. And I think that in the art community, there is something similar going on there. They don't see themselves as workers. They kind of want, they want their independence, and they think that in joining a union movement, in organizing in that way, that this will somehow compromise them with their and their independence. And what they don't seem to realize is it's the exact opposite. Whenever we join together in solidarity, what we end up with is more independence, more control over our lives. And there need not be starving artists. There should not be that. But once again, as Julius pointed out, the industry is owned. And that means that the workers within that industry do not get what they deserve.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, so we're going to go into our last round of questions now, of which there will be 3. But in this case, you will only get 3 minutes. to answer. And the lineup will be Barry, Sandra, Stephen, and Julius. Kurt, the last three questions, please.
Okay, so our first question comes from Mark Lister. He asks, what are some ways that unions can support the Green New Deal type policies, just transition for workers in sunset industries such as fossil fuels? Gary Porter asks, what is the program on which the slate will run? The WAM slate, that is. And Africa asks, do the panelists see the CLC as relevant to Canadian revolutionary workers? Could the argument not be made that the CLC is defunct?
Okay, all right. So the first panelist is Barry.
So I don't think you have to make the argument. I think it's clear the CLC is defunct. But I hope with WAM putting forward militant progressive team together, it won't be anymore. I also think it's slightly defunct because there's no mechanisms of accountability. Convention every 3 years, very hands off. Before then, there's not much access to it or ability to push back on. But it has the ability, theoretically, to be quite relevant in a revolutionary workers' manner. It's just, it will never be if we put a bunch of liberals there. It needs to have revolutionary people there, and it has to have a way where it breaks down the mechanisms where people aren't able to participate within it. And I think that's part of the problem too, is where people don't really talk about the CLC until like every 3 years or until like, they endorse Bill Morneau. There's has to be mechanisms put in place where people can participate throughout the 3 years to push back on them, to hold them accountable, and that doesn't currently exist. But I think starting these conversations now of folks wanting to reclaim the labor movement can push it there. And are we going to get there in June? I don't know. But we're going to start building stuff. We're going to start shifting conversations, because the same things about the OFL, in Ontario. It's the Ontario Federation of Labor, a revolutionary workers thing. Definitely not. But we pushed on them, and we've redirected some of the conversation, how they're allocating funds to different groups that are revolutionary, right? Like the support of Land Back Lane, these mechanisms that push decolonization. And we need to start doing the same with the CLC. Just looking through the other questions here. I can't really speak to what the slate will run. I think those conversations may take place later on. What are some ways that unions can support Green New Deal? I think a lot of it's that education part. A lot of it's ensuring that green new jobs are unionized, that we carry workers over from old industries or retrain them into new industries that they want to go into, so that they can be part of the conversation and not feel like that the labor movement is pushing them out or not representing them, or that they don't hold a place within it. So I think that's key, is pulling those folks in, and a lot of education around why we need green jobs, why we need green economy, and letting them know that they fit into it, that we can create those jobs with high wages, benefits, vacation, all those things. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Keep in mind, panelists, it's only 3 minutes this time for this round, the last round. Sandra?
Yes. So the Green New Deal, for me, it creates job and also protects the environment. Is very beneficial for future generation, because nature will be preserved. Just walking around, just when you think about the Caribbean, you can just walk anywhere, pick a mango, to eat. I think the union should support the politicians, and organizations that purport the Green New Deal. I don't talk a lot, so that's my contribution here.
Okay, Sandra, thank you. Stephen, 3 minutes.
Okay, so just a second. I've just been joined by my little dog here in the room, so she really wants petting pretty badly. Yeah, just to start off with the Green New Deal.
Let's see your little dog.
Oh, here. Okay, here.
I want to see the dog.
Okay, Barry. W.
Okay. Come on, Perla. I always had trouble with Okay, so her name is Perla, and Perla, and we got her
So cute.
yes, we got her in Puerto Vallarta about 4 years ago now, I guess. She was in the poorest kennel shelter in Puerto Vallarta, and she's been a real blessing for Annabelle, my wife, and myself. So, okay, that's all I had to say. I think I had the best answer. All right, back to the Green New Deal. The devil is in the details, and basically what has to happen is workers have to take control over what that is. We can't allow corporations and a government that does not listen to workers drive what that is. We really have to unify around this. This is a really important part of where our support has to be. So we have to lay out what this just transition is going to be. We can't wait for it to be given to us. And I really want to see the unions and the workers in those areas start to say, here's what we need. We have an example of it when with Site C, where the power coming from there, which is actually being driven by government supporting companies like SNC-Lavalin. The power coming from that is going to be 10 times as expensive as the power coming from solar panel fields in Alberta. It's ridiculous. We have to get control over what those things are. That means nationalizing those industries, nationalizing that sector, and shutting it down and making the appropriate moves to the green economy. Again, we will build it. It's not going to be built by capital. It's going to be built by workers. Gary's question about the slate, and I tend to agree with Barry that we can't really say what the slate is going to run on, what the platform is, but I think just in general, it's got to be worker power. And we make and do everything. We have to recognize that. We have to take pride in that, in being part of the working class. And this has to be something that is within Canada, but also it has to reach beyond Canada. And we have to, as a national organization, the CLC should be reaching out internationally with other labor activists around the world, which leads us to the next question.
30 seconds.
If the CLC didn't exist, we'd have to make it. That's basically it. We need a national organization which will connect with an international organization. It's broken, and we could throw it out if it's really if it's unfixable. But hey, we're workers. We fix everything too. So let's fix it.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Okay, Julius.
Yeah, thank you. So to Gary's question, what is the program? Well, I guess, and the fine print is yet to be determined. Each time we go into one of these things, we want to keep our demands up to date. But certainly, some key things that we would ask for are around, for instance, issues of equity and racial justice, to end white supremacy in our movement and beyond. The defund, disarm, and abolish the police. Police are not workers. I think that we should let folks know, what our position is, that police are not workers and they have no place in our movement. We fight against concessions bargaining, which has become the norm for decades, for union democracy, for international solidarity with workers everywhere, for eco-socialism, mass action to defeat the austerity agenda, and for no class collaboration with the boss's parties. Those are just some of the ideas that I that I think that we should consider when we put a program together. Lastly, I would like to say that, yes, certainly, you know, the CLC, the OFL, Labor Council, many unions, many locals don't do very much, but that doesn't present an excuse for us to ignore them. They're still the organized arm of the working class. It's ripe for the picking. Revolutionaries should engage. If they're worth anything, they must engage within the workers' movement, and that means sometimes swimming through the bullshit that that we have to swim through in order to get our ideas out there and change society. Thank you.
Can I just jump in real quick? Because I didn't use my last 30 seconds, and now Julius just reminded me of something I didn't get to say, and that is that cops are not workers. And I just have to join in with Julius on that cops are not workers, because I don't know how I missed saying that at all. I think because you just did it so well. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I want to thank our panelists, Sandra, Barry, Stephen, and Julius, and this ends this part of the conference. And thank you so much. So now we're going to move into, and I was supposed to go to Barry Wise' letter at this point in time, but I see that he's not on, oh, here he comes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn it over for a moment to Barry Wise' letter, because I think he has a motion. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, sisters and brothers, comrades and friends, I want to present a motion just to focus the discussion at this juncture of the conference. And I think I'm in a position to do that as one of the organizers of the conference, to try to crystallize the sentiment of the discussion. I anticipate that this motion will be approved. So let's see. I move that WAM strive to run a diverse team of candidates for the top 4 positions on the CLC executive, president, secretary, treasurer, and 2 vice presidents, and run on the policies of WAM visible on its website. Okay, so let me break that down. That WAM strive, so there's no guarantee here. It's an indication of an endeavor, that WAM strive to run a diverse team of candidates. And that means I would not favor running 4 males, least of all 4 white males, but I don't think we have, I think we can avoid that fairly easily. But it's important that there be at least 1, if not 2 or more female candidates. So that WAM strive to run a diverse team of candidates for the top 4 positions on the CLC executive, and they're identified in the motion as president, secretary, treasurer, first executive vice president, second executive vice president, and run on the policies of WAM visible on its website. And that would include the policies on the WAM website on which we fielded a team of candidates at the OFL in November 2019. And that's not intended to be an exclusive set of policies, but that would be the basis of unity, and to add anything that diverges significantly from that body of policy and principle, we would have to seek approval through some kind of a consultation, like we're doing
Barry.
This meeting. So
we'll stop you there, because I should have, before you did your rational to rationalize your motion, I should have asked for a seconder. Do we have a seconder? Kurt, is there a seconder from our audience for this motion?
We do not have it at the moment. Let me see.
I second.
Julius seconds it.
All right. Did you speak to me, Kurt?
Yes, I said Julius made it. Has
Yeah.
second.
Okay. All right. So it's second. Okay, Barry. Continue for 30 seconds to rationalize your rationalization.
I just wanted to explain the motion and break it down into its components so people know that we're striving, that we seek diversity, that we're looking to run for 4 positions if we can come up with a diverse team, and that it's based on the WAM policies on the website and that on which we've run recently. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. So the motion is duly moved and seconded. I will take one speaker for and one against this motion. Is there anybody in our listening audience, Kurt, that wants to speak for or against this motion before I ask somebody on our panel?
Just a point of information, Chair. Just keep in mind there's a delay between when you're speaking right now and
Yes.
when it's broadcast on YouTube.
That's right, and that's the reason I know Kurt was waiting for that. But so anyway, thanks, Julius. All right, so is there a speaker for or against the motion in our listening audience? Kurt?
Let's see. I know that I believe a member of our former panel wishes
Yes.
to speak.
Okay, speaking for or against?
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly respond, Colin. There's no formal membership required. If you could hear me. Julius wishes to speak in favor.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Julius.
Yeah, I understand that it's kind of difficult for us to have as good of an interactive experience as we'd like to, since we're doing this all online. But I'd like to speak in favor of the motion. I think that we can gain a lot by running 4 candidates, if possible, keeping in mind a diverse team, in order to get our message across to delegates of the CLC, because that's really what this is all about, is presenting a new set of ideas. We know that based on what we did at the last OFL convention, that there is an appetite for our ideas. And we want to build WAM. We want to build a workers' action movement, and in order to do that, we need to present our ideas and expose our ideas to the workers through the CLC in this situation. And I'm also in favor of running our platform based on the policies listed on the website, which would be the bulk of them. There may be 1 or 2 additional ones that may not have been addressed on the website. But yes, I'm in favor of both.
Okay, is there anybody against this motion?
I do not see anyone stating they're against this motion. Nicholas T. would also like to speak in favor of this motion. If you
Okay, well I did say 1 for and 1 against, but okay, we will allow 1 more speaker and then we will move on. Nicholas? Go ahead, Nicholas.
Thank you. I too would like to support the motion, speak in support of that motion by Barry. I think it's really important that a diverse group of candidates run, that WAM puts up a diverse group of candidates, and I really support that idea, because when we do that, we'll ensure that we're representative of, if elected, all the diverse group of workers. Thank you.
Okay, so there's no other speakers, so I guess, and there was nobody online or on the panel I spoke against, so it would be very difficult to take a vote on this. So I guess Barry Conway will be very happy we have consensus that we're going to do this. Okay, because I think that's the best way to do it. There's nobody spoke against it, okay? All right, so Barry Weisleiter, your second motion.
Okay, comrades and friends, once again, if you don't mind, I'll present a motion to try to promote a discussion on options. I would like to nominate, well, I think we should strive to run 4 candidates and a diverse team. So I would like to see definitely Nicholas and Julius run as part of this team. One of them should run for president. Perhaps it should be Nicholas, but I don't want to put that in the motion. So I'd like to nominate Nicholas and Julius, and I'd also like to nominate Debbie, who spoke on the first panel, and she was on the conference for hours. I don't see her on the tiles on the right-hand side of my screen. So maybe since you're in the same...
She's not here anymore.
maybe Julius can give her a call, because it's kind of awkward to nominate someone and to elect them if they don't give approval.
Don't do it. We haven't had a conversation with her about it.
Right. Well, I did post it on the chat, and
and I said no.
She can speak for herself.
She's not. She wasn't here. She wasn't here.
Okay, but she should speak for herself, is my point. There's another. Well, I think Stephen would make an excellent candidate, but we would have to be absolutely 100% sure that we're going to have a female candidate in order to run 3 males. Stephen is the outgoing president of the 3rd largest labor council in the country. And he's very articulate, as we confirmed during the course of the conference. He'd make an excellent candidate. But, perception is a large part of politics. So we need balance. So if not Stephen, and assuming Debbie is a yes, or another female is a yes, there's another possibility, and that's Aga up in Grassy Narrows, Ontario. She is an elementary school teacher working on the Indigenous Reserve. But I'm just not sure about her status as a member of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, which is affiliated to the Canadian Labour Congress. But if she's not a member in good standing of the union, and not just like an observer or a visitor, or some lesser category, then that would be problematic. And I think she's watching, along with her partner, Spencer, on this conference, and maybe they can write in a comment with regard to this matter. But I see those are the possibilities. So the purpose of my motion is basically to get people to write in or speak up, and let's put together the best slate that we can. I think our intentions are clear. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I have a seconder. Once again, I should have got it before I allowed you to go on, but I didn't. So do I have a seconder for this motion? Julius? Okay, so Julius is seconding the motion. So it's duly moved and second, and the idea is that we have 3 people on right here on our panel that possibly can run, and I will let Nicholas speak for himself in a moment, and Julius and Stephen. We certainly need a woman running, or 2. So we will reach out and see who we can find, and then once we do that and we get the candidates in, a discussion will have to take place on the best slate. I hate the word slate, but that's what it is, I guess, that we can have. So I think that's the route we should go. And seeing there's no women on here today that have spoken up, except maybe Debbie, and we will have to talk to her. So, and saying that, I'm going to go to Nicholas. Nicholas, are you willing to run, and which position would you be interested in?
Thank you. Thank you. When I began my opening remarks earlier today by saying that labor is in jeopardy, and that's because it is. There is a crisis at the top of labor at the Canadian Labour Congress, and we really need leadership, Elizabeth, that is not only diverse but effective, and will fight to empower the rank and file. We've heard that term being consistently used throughout the theme of this this conference, and we need to have leadership that will empower the rank and file, the grassroots supporters. We need leadership that will move labor away from the corporate old guard structure and move it towards grassroots campaigns, empowering labor councils, and truly combating systemic discrimination, anti-Black discrimination, anti-Indigenous discrimination. At present, I'm leading the largest ever effort to combat systemic discrimination in Canada's public service, which I really know will open up not only the public service for all underrepresented groups, and making the public service stronger serving Canadians, but I know it will create a stronger labor movement, and which will be inclusive of everyone. So, comrades, if I wasn't clear in everything that I've just said there, I am seeking your support to run on a WAM ticket for the president of the Canadian Labour Congress.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Okay, so Julius, are you were nominated? Are you willing to run?
Yes. I with thanks to my nominator, I am willing to run, and I'm honored to run on a ticket with Nicholas and anyone else who wants to fight the status quo in our labor movement. We've got so many challenges ahead, and I really and truly do believe that there are so many opportunities for us to change our labor movement and fight for a better world. And I'm excited about this. So yes, I accept.
Okay. All right. Stephen? I know you've shown an interest. I think Barry mentioned your name. Are you still interested?
I'm quite conflicted, in fact. I really don't think I'm the best choice in so many ways. I think that it would be best to have a balance of males and females. I believe I saw in the chat that Aga's going to accept a nomination. I really think we need another woman, especially with the Team Unite being all women. I also think that we need diversity, and I'd like to see someone like Kurt Young come forward, or Barry Conway already had some success at the OFL convention. So I really, I wouldn't say that I'm not willing to run. I just don't think I should be the person. I really think we need more women involved, and that's we don't need another white guy.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I'm going to ask Kurt. Kurt, are you still thinking about it?
I tentatively accept in this. Let's see if I can put my camera on. I tentatively accept in saying that if there is a woman, or if there are two women that stand up, I will quickly step down for them to take my place on the slate. I believe that we need to have female voices in this. And I also would like to say that we have another member of in the chat that was mentioned who wishes to state that she's willing to accept. Aga says that she's willing to accept and that she's a member in good standing with her union. So that I accept on my behalf, and I put her name out there, and thank you to my nominator.
Okay. Well, folks, the way that I see it, unless there's some objections from the people on screen here or in our listening audience, that right now we have Nicholas and Julius and possibly Kurt, and we need to reach out to Debbie and to Agatha, or maybe there's another woman that somebody knows that would like to put your name forward. Then I think when that's done, then a discussion will have to take place of putting the best slate forward. I think we've gone as far as we can go today with this.
I'd just like to interrupt. Agnieszka says she accepts. She
accepts. Okay, so we have a woman, but I know Debbie has already also shown some interest. So as I said, we will Agnes' name will be added, and then we will talk to Debbie, and then we can go from there and put the best slate forward. Another discussion will have to take place. But I think we've gone as far as we can go. So unless there's a objection, who did? What's this message? Who did Debbie say she expressed interest in running to? I don't know. I heard this from Barry Weisletter, so I don't know. Anyway, we will reach out and ask her. Her name has come up, so we will, if we're in doubt, we will reach out and talk to her. So, are there any objections from the people on screen or the people in our listening audience that we go right now? We have Nicholas, Julius, Kurt, and is it Aggie?
It's Aga.
Aga.
But she goes by Aga.
Okay, Aga.
Just on procedure, Chair, may I withdraw my motion and allow it to be replaced with that we accept Nicholas and Julius as the WAM candidates. This conference accepts them. That we welcome Kurt's nomination as well, and that we consult with and welcome Aga's nomination as well, and consult with Debbie. And after that's done, that we put together the most diverse team that we can in light of, the consultation with Debbie, etc. I also wanted to say it would have been my honor as well to propose Sandra. I think she'd be terrific, but she indicated that she was not prepared at this stage to allow her name to stand. So I just don't want her to be overlooked. She has my confidence as a good candidate, but she declined in advance. That's the only reason I didn't present her. I didn't present Barry Conway because he indicated likewise he wanted to focus on the OFL next time. So I just want to make sure there's no disrespect intended to any. We have many capable people, but I think we should accept Nicholas, Julius, Kurt, and Aga now, consult with Debbie, and then put together a team after that consultation is completed.
I think that's what I said. So are there any objections on screen or in our listening audience to what Barry Weisletter just presented?
I
don't see any. Okay, so then that's it. We have a consensus on going forward with that. Is there any other business for this conference, Julius?
Not that I'm aware of. This is great. This is a great start. And I think that over the next few weeks, those of us who are willing to step forward, and anyone else who's interested in forming a sort of a steering committee for the CLC convention should contact us to get involved, because we want to put together a campaign, a strong campaign. And that
put your telephone numbers as well as your emails.
Yes, with telephone and email. And we want to let's fill a slate. We need to find some more candidates. So please reach out to us. If you can leave your email address in the chat box, or if you're not comfortable with doing that, you can send us an email directly. Our email address is workersactionmovement@gmail.com, or you can connect with us through the website, www.thewam.ca.
Okay, so seeing that, I want to thank our panelists from earlier today, which is Debbie and my goodness, I've lost my notes now. Who was from Debbie, and of course Greg and Nicholas, and then our panelist we just had now, which is okay. I see you on the screen. Stephen, Barry, Julius, and Sandra. Of course, Sandra. And I would have liked to have seen Sandra put her name forward too, but I understand why. Okay, so I want to thank you all.
We need photos and bios from everyone.
And thank you, Kurt, for producing one more time for us. And thank you to our listening audience. So stay safe, everybody.
Thanks for chairing, Elizabeth.
Excellent
no
sharing.
Problem.
Once again,
okay.
Elizabeth. Excellent sharing.
So thank you. Stay safe, everybody. And Nicholas, yes, you saw put in the chat, we will have to reconvene soon, and we will. Okay? So have a good day. Bye for now.
Jamaica. Enjoy the sun.
I will.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody.
Bye, Nicholas.